What if you woke up tomorrow in a medieval castle, surrounded by secrets so dark and deliciously absurd that they could make a jester weep? Think your morning routine is chaotic? Consider the mouth-watering breakfast of stale bread and gruel, with a side of looming threats from the castle's resident warlocks and the odd wayward knight. Life in these stone fortresses wasn't merely lived, it was a high-stakes game of survival, rife with enough intrigue to leave modern soap operas blushing. Ever wondered what it felt like to scrub floors with the same water you'd drink? Picture a world where the air hangs heavy with the scent of roasted meat mingling with the acrid stench of unwashed bodies. No modern conveniences, no pause button, just relentless chaos wrapped in a tapestry of blood, betrayal, and the occasional catapult demonstration. You thought your Wi-Fi was slow? Try sending messages on a pigeon or hoping the town crier remembers your last name. And the politics? A twisted dance of power where loyalty was as fleeting as yesterday's bread. One wrong glance at the wrong noble could lead to a beheading, and don't even think about sidestepping the Lord's temper, his mood swings could spark a rebellion. Picture your life hanging by a thread while your neighbor plots treachery over a flagon of ale. Imagine your evening, gathered around a fire with scullions and lords alike, sharing stories of heroism that are just as likely to end in laughter as they are in tears. But behind those jovial masks, the suspicion crackles like the embers. Should you trust the squire with the charming smile? Or the maid whose eyes dart like a trapped rabbit? How do you navigate a world where a harmless prank can escalate into a duel for honor or death? Ever thought of charming a courtier? Picture him, lips slick with honeyed words, spinning tales that could decimate alliances and ignite vendettas. Did you know that a single misstep in the castle's winding halls could lead to a trapdoor to the dungeons, where the stench of despair lingers like a long-lost ghost? But let's not forget laughter, the kind that cuts through the grimness like a sharpened sword. A jester's witty retorts echoing through stone corridors while the lord slouches on his throne, a hand resting on his empty goblet, all too aware that in this world, the line between jest and danger is razor-thin. So, how does one survive? Through cunning, deception, and perhaps a touch of madness. For in a castle, the only certainty is uncertainty itself. Breathe in the smoke of intrigue, taste the bitterness of betrayal. You're not merely reading history, you're grappling with a legacy of chaos that still echoes through the ages. The door creaks open, revealing a darkness laced with laughter and peril. Will you step in? Or will the shadows consume you whole? The choice is yours, but remember, in a medieval castle, nothing is ever as it seems. A crack splits the air, shattering the stillness of the night. It echoes through the castle's stone corridors, a sound that feels almost alive, that ripples against the weathered walls stained with whispers of regret and history. There's something hauntingly beautiful about the way the moonlight filters through the narrow windows, illuminating dust motes that dance like lost spirits in the damp chill. I remember when I first stepped inside this fortress, its formidable silhouette looming against the indigo sky, each stone a testament to centuries of secrets kept tight within. I remember the weight of the air, thick and electric, as if the castle itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The chill seeps into my bones, coiling around my heart, reminding me of the darkness that lurks in every shadow. I inhale sharply, the scent of moss and decay invading my senses, yet there is a strange comfort in this decay, a reminder that even the strongest structures are not immortal. Then there's Elara, a firebrand cloaked in shadows. Her fingers tremble, not from fear, but from a fervent rage that ignites within her. She stands at the edge of the great hall, her gaze fixed on the imposing stone fireplace where ashes still smolder as if the flames had only just retreated. It was built to protect, but it became a prison, she whispers, her voice a low, haunting melody that intertwines with the night's despair. Her heart beats a furious rhythm, a protest against the walls that close in on her. Memories of confinement dance in her mind, and she fights against the pull of hopelessness. Just beyond her, Marcus paces like a caged beast. His brow is furrowed, a tempest of thought swirling within him, and each footfall is heavy with unspoken fears. This castle, his ancestral home, has become a labyrinth of guilt and unfulfilled desires. We cannot hide here forever, he murmurs, agony lacing each word, as if the very stones beneath his feet conspire to keep him shackled. The walls have ears, and time? Time is a spectre that hounds us. With every heartbeat, he feels the weight of his ancestors pressing down on him, a legacy of choices made long before he entered this world. The castle's structure looms omnipresent, a fusion of strength and vulnerability. Its soaring towers reach skyward, like fingers clawing at the heavens, yet within those walls, the very essence of despair clings to the air. The thick walls, once a barrier against the chaos of the outside world, now seem to pulse with a sinister life of their own. Where once there was safety, a cacophony of dread now stirs, as if the stones themselves whisper tales of betrayal and blood. I remember the way the narrow staircases spiral like the spirals of fate, leading to rooms that have borne witness to laughter and love, treachery and loss. Each creaking step beneath my foot sends shivers through my spine. Are they ghosts I hear? Or merely the remnants of memories etched into the very foundation of the castle? It's an unsettling symphony, an echo of life once lived, and in these moments of reflection, the castle's design becomes a mirror of our own imperfections. Ilara's voice cuts through the fog of my thoughts, sharp and unyielding. This place was meant to thrive, strong, impenetrable. But it falters, like us. She moves toward the window, hands pressed against the cold stone, eyes searching the horizon for a flicker of hope. Look out there, she urges, her voice rising like the tide. The world is vast. We are but shadows in this fortress of stone. But Marcus shakes his head, his resolve faltering in the face of her conviction. And what lies beyond, Ilara? Monsters? The darkness is not just here, it follows us. The flickering candlelight dances like a heartbeat, illuminating the turmoil etched on his features. The castle's design, with its heavy oak doors and barred windows, is both a sanctuary and a reminder of their fears, each barred window a prison, each door a threshold to unknown horrors. Time drips slowly, painfully, as the clock tower tolls, each chime resonating deep within us, a relentless reminder of our own ticking mortality. I remember that time is a thief, robbing us of moments we cannot reclaim. As the sound reverberates through the hall, I feel the tremor in Ilara's hands, the quiver of Marcus's breath, both of them facing the abyss that yawns before us. Together. Ilara's voice is a fragile thread woven with hope and despair. Can we not break free? But the castle's shadows grow longer, wrapping around us like a shroud. A chill sweeps through the air, and suddenly, I am overcome by the weight of the past, the ghosts of those who came before us, bound within these walls. Their laughter, their cries, their very essence tangled in the fabric of this structure. It's a tapestry of lives lived, choices made, love found, and love lost. And then comes the crash, a sound that shatters the fragile moment like glass splintering underfoot. The door bursts open, a gust of wind swirling in like a vengeful spirit, tearing through the silence. We must go. The voice is commanding, but it is laced with fear. The castle shudders, as if it too recognizes the urgency, the impending doom that whispers through the cracks. It is a warning, a plea, resist or succumb. What if we stay? Marcus's voice trembles, raw with emotion. What if the walls are all we have left? The question hangs heavy in the air, each heartbeat amplifying the tension that coils around us. We stand at the precipice of choice, the castle's structure looming large, a silent witness to our turmoil. The stones seem to pulse with the weight of our souls, each one a testament to the burdens we carry. I remember the night when the stars aligned, and for a brief moment, I felt the weight of the cosmos pressing down upon me, as if the universe itself conspired to remind me that nothing is eternal, not the castle, not our fears. The night is vast, and so too are the possibilities that lie beyond these stone walls. But the echoes of the past scream louder than the future's promise, and I find myself torn, the safety of these walls or the uncertainty of freedom. The shadows beckon, a siren song that both terrifies and entices. In this moment, I realize that the heart of the castle is not merely its structure, it is the struggle of those who inhabit it, their dreams and fears interwoven with the very stones that surround us. And as the storm gathers strength outside, I know that our paths are forever altered. It's a delicate thread, an intertwining of lives, a constant push and pull. The castle stands strong, but within its embrace, we are fragile, haunted by the choices we have yet to make. The darkness lingers, thick and impenetrable, as we stand on the brink of confrontation with our own demons, our own desires. The castle's strength is our strength, but but its shadows may yet consume us. In this hallowed space, we are bound together by our struggles, and I can feel the heartbeat of the castle in every breath, a thrum of history, of sorrow, of hope. I remember, this is just the beginning. The air was thick with tension, a silence so profound it swallowed the world. The village of Eldergrove lay cloaked in twilight, shadows stretched long and ominous as the villagers whispered, their voices trembling like leaves in the wind. In the heart of the village, a boy named Thomas stood, his breath coming in ragged gasps, eyes wide, staring at the gallows that loomed just beyond the square. Today was not just another day, it was a reckoning. "Mother," he began, but the words choked in his throat. He remembered her laughter, bright and infectious, before the dark days descended, before the Lord's men came, bringing chains and fear. A figure emerged from the shadows, Lord Alaric, regal and ruthless, his cloak trailing like a spectre of death. There was a chill in the air, a promise of bloodshed. "How dare you, a mere serf, stand before me?" he boomed, voice like thunder. Thomas quaked, his small frame trembling. And then there was Elara, her spirit woven into the very fabric of the village. A vassal's daughter, she wore her duty-like armor, yet it clung to her like a shroud. She was beautiful in her defiance, but that beauty was marred by the weight of obligation. Her heart ached for Thomas, for the boy was not just a friend, he was the embodiment of her dreams, of a life untouched by the iron grip of feudal obligation. "We can't let them take him," she whispered, urgency seeping through her voice like water through cracked earth. But these words, fierce and unyielding, danced on the edge of despair. The village watched, breath held, hearts pounding like war drums. The Lord's men were merciless, eyes cold as steel. They had come for retribution, a punishment for the villagers' insubordination, their whispered hopes against the backdrop of despair. The villagers, a tapestry of faces etched with worry, stood in a semicircle around the gallows, their lives intertwined like roots of a gnarled tree. Old men rasped ancient curses under their breath, while mothers clutched their children, protectiveness a feeble shield against the encroaching darkness. There was a dread in the air, thick enough to choke on, what would happen next? I remember the stories, Thomas thought as his heart raced, the tales of knights and valor. But where were they now? Where was valor when it mattered? He looked at Elara, and in that look, a silent understanding passed between them, a shared dream of freedom that seemed impossibly far. "Let him go!" Elara cried, her voice a fragile tremor, but the Lord's cold laugh sliced through the air like a blade. "You think you can command me, girl? Your father knelt before me, and you will do the same, or share his fate." Thomas felt the world tilt. The fear prickled at the back of his neck, a reminder of all the moments discarded in the pursuit of survival. He was no one, nothing but a serf, molded by the grip of the land and the will of the lords. But the flicker of rebellion ignited within him, an ember against the overwhelming darkness. "I won't be a coward," he whispered to himself, each word a promise. Hope stirred, fragile as a newborn bird, yet powerful in its audacity. Elara's gaze locked onto his, fierce and unwavering. She could feel the fear clawing at her insides, the doubt whispering poison in her ears, but she willed herself to stand tall. "We rise together or fall alone," she breathed, the words laced with desperation and a fierce resolve. But then the Lord's men surged forward, brutal and unyielding. The villagers shrank back, a mass of quivering flesh against the merciless tide. Alaric's smile was a crescent moon, sharp and cruel. "You think you can defy me? I am your master. Your lives are mine to wield." It was unbearable, the weight of power and oppression, the pain of watching the bravest among them be snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Thomas felt the tears sting his eyes. "I remember laughter," he thought, "and dreams of a life without chains." But there was something electric in the air, a spark swirling amidst the despair. As the noose tightened around the neck of a comrade, a cry of defiance erupted from the crowd, raw and primal. "We will not be silenced." The words resonated through the villagers, an anthem of resistance, a heartbeat echoing against the unforgiving stone of the Lord's fortress. Elara drew closer to Thomas, her voice barely above a whisper. "We must act." It was a plea, a command, a prayer all in one. She felt the gravity of their circumstances pressing down like a leaden weight, yet in the depths of her spirit, the fire raged brighter. As the Lord's men advanced, swords drawn, thundering hooves approaching like the inexorable march of fate, Thomas felt the pulse of the earth beneath his feet. What if this was the moment, he thought, his heart racing. What if we could turn the tide? But in the chaos, the shadows danced, and fear clutched at their throats like a vice. The noose was pulled taut, and the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky a canvas of blood-red hues, portents of doom. In that moment, time twisted, memories shattered and recombined like shards of glass reflecting different realities. Thomas saw visions of freedom, of laughter, of a world unfettered by the chains of serfdom. But as the world around him bled into darkness, he felt a pull, a tether to his fate, to Ilara, to the hope that flickered like a dying flame. And so, they stood there, hearts racing, souls intertwined, gazing into the abyss, waiting for the moment when the world would explode, when they would either break free or be crushed under the weight of the feudal chains that bound them. A heartbeat, a breath, a clash. The night swallowed their cries, and the shadows deepened, wrapping around them in an embrace both terrifying and alive. The world shimmered with the promise of rebellion, the unyielding hope that one day soon, it would not just be a dream. The clock ticked in the darkness, relentless and unforgiving. Time was a ghost, a haunting reminder of the past, and yet, the future waited, breathless, teetering on the edge of despair and defiance, as night fell like a curtain on their fates. A scream sliced through the dawn fog, sharp as a knife against the stillness. The sound fluttered through the corridors of the sprawling estate, echoing off marble walls. It was that kind of scream that sent chills up the spines of even the most hardened souls. I remember standing there, frozen, heart pounding like a caged animal, while the servants scurried like frightened sparrows at the first sign of danger. The sun hadn't yet breached the horizon, but the shadows felt long and menacing, curling around the corners of my mind. Lady Eleanor, my sister, stood at the edge of the grand staircase, her breath hitching as she clutched the banister. She was always the brave one, the one who tore through life like a tempest, yet now her face was ghostly, the color drained as if the very essence of her spirit had been snatched away. "What was that?" she whispered, eyes wide, searching mine for reassurance I couldn't give. I remember the way her fingers trembled, the way she looked at me, as if I could conjure safety from thin air. Just moments before, the world had moved languidly. It had been a day like any other, our morning rituals wrapped in layers of tradition and the perfumed air of home. The servants carried trays laden with breakfast, their chatter a symphony of mundane concerns. "The eggs are extra fluffy today, my lady," one had exclaimed, as if the fluffiness could erase the weight that settled like stone in my gut. But now, the weight pressed harder. I could taste the metallic tang of fear in the air, thick and suffocating. Not far from us, my father's study loomed like a dark sentinel. The doors were ajar, and the cold, eerie light of the morning spilled out, mingling with something more sinister. I remembered the stories of the shadows that danced in the corners, of the whispers that slipped from the walls. "Stay close," I said, though the words felt like a brittle promise, a facade of courage when my insides churned like a violent sea. Eleanor nodded, but the fear glimmering in her eyes betrayed her. I moved down the hall, my feet heavy as I approached the study. Each step echoed with the heartbeat of the house, each footfall a reminder that the gilded life we led was but a fragile veneer. I longed to slip back into the comfortable routines, breakfast with honeyed bread, the warmth of sunlight streaming through the grand windows, the laughter of friends gathered for a game of cards. But now, my world felt distorted, the edges fraying like old fabric. "Father!" I called, voice trembling like the last leaf clinging to a branch in autumn. Silence. An oppressive silence that wrapped around us, stifling. Then the scream rang out again, this time more visceral. I felt it in my bones, a pulse that quickened the air. Eleanor stepped back, brushing against the wall as if it might offer protection. "What if it's the plague?" Her words cut through the fog of dread, a chilling reminder of the world outside our golden cage, where death lingered like an unwanted guest. I shook my head, trying to dispel the thought. It can't be. But my own certainty wavered as I pushed the door fully open, the hinges creaking like old bones protesting. The sight before me was a tapestry of horror woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Father lay slumped over his desk, the scattered papers around him bearing witness to his last moments. a quill still clutched in his hand, ink smeared across the page like spilled blood. My heart seized, a ragged breath caught in my throat. A familiar weight settled over me, the kind reserved for family secrets and buried truths. Help! Someone! I screamed, the sound clawing its way out of me, desperate. I rushed forward, Eleanor's pace lagging behind, her expression a mirror of my own horror. As I reached him, the reality of his lifeless form hit me like a fist to the gut. It was a surreal moment, time twisting and contorting, a snapshot of despair frozen in the splintered frame of our lives. Is he? Eleanor choked, her voice barely more than a whisper, a fragile thread in a storm. I didn't have the strength to respond, to voice what we both feared. Then, just as the fog of dread began to lift, we heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, determined. My breath quickened, each beat drumming against my ribcage as the door swung open, revealing Lord Cedric, our family's advisor, his face marble pale, eyes dark with secrets. He stepped inside, framed by the dim light, a spectre moving through the remnants of our shattered world. "What has happened?" he demanded, his voice sharp, cutting through the haze of grief. The authority he exuded felt like a noose tightening, and I wanted to scream, to tell him to leave us be. What could he possibly know about our sorrow? But in that moment, I noticed the flicker of something in his eyes, a glimmer that spoke of knowledge, a burden he bore that felt too heavy for a single soul. I wanted to shake him, to demand answers, yet an unnameable fear held me captive, like a deer caught in the unyielding gaze of a wolf. "What are we going to do?" Eleanor's voice trembled, her resolve cracking like dry earth. I glanced at father once more, the fragile facade of our noble life crumbling. "We'll do what we must," I whispered, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. Cedric stepped closer, a shadow creeping over us. "There are things you do not understand," he said slowly, each word a weight against my chest, and I felt the air grow thicker, more oppressive as the sun languished behind the clouds. "Things that have been set in motion long before today." The air crackled with tension, secrets twisting like smoke around us, wrapping us in a shroud that whispered of darkness, betrayal, and an uncertain future. In that moment, I realized the routines we had relied upon were but fragile tethers to a reality that was slipping away like sand through our fingers. And with that, the day began to unfurl, a tapestry of dread stitched with the threads of our daily lives, binding us in a struggle against the shadows that danced just beyond our awareness, a waltz where every step could lead to both salvation and doom. The noble facade of our family was an illusion, and beneath it lay a churning tempest, waiting to be unleashed. A candle flickered in the vast chamber, casting a dance of shadows against the stone walls, and with each beat of its flame, the air thickened with the acrid scent of fear and desperation. Lady Eloan stood at the edge of the room, her heart a drum echoing the chaos that enveloped her castle. The distant clamor of clashing swords seeped through the walls, a grim reminder that her world was on the brink of collapse. She was the heart of this fortress, a delicate, yet unyielding presence in a tempest of turmoil, and as the chaos surged, so did her resolve. "I remember the first time I felt the weight of this crown," she whispered to the empty room, her voice barely a murmur above the din. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the necklace that rested against her chest, her mother's legacy, now a yoke. Eloan's gaze flickered to the window, where the sky transformed into a bruised palette of purples and blacks, an ominous canvas reflecting her inner turmoil. I was 16. The world was full of dreams and laughter then, before the shadows came. But the laughter faded like a ghost, leaving only the chill of betrayal. Her husband, Lord Cedric, a man with the fierce heart of a lion and the cunning of a fox, had rallied the villagers against her. They were hungry, and hunger bred desperation. They bathed once a year, she'd joked once, but the humor had curdled in her throat like spoiled milk. Now they saw her as the embodiment of their suffering, a lady in a castle of stone, far removed from their plight. Outside, the howls of the agitated mob echoed, punctuated by the clang of iron. They demanded justice, or perhaps vengeance, it mattered little to the dead. Memories of the banquet table draped in fine cloth, laden with food that now seemed like a cruel joke, swirled around her mind. She had watched Cedric smile, his eyes glinting with pride as he spoke of prosperity, unaware that the very men who cheered him would soon sharpen their blades against him. I loved you, Cedric, she murmured, the word slipping through her lips like a prayer. But love is a fickle thing, isn't it? Each heartbeat was a reminder that love could twist into a weapon, a blade forged in the fires of ambition and deceit. She had borne his children, nurtured his dreams, but now she felt like a spectre in her own life, estranged from the man who once held her hand and whispered sweet promises in the moonlight. Her thoughts drifted, pulling her deeper into the shadows of her fears and regrets. Across the room, a figure emerged, a servant girl named Myra, her youthful face marred by the harshness of the world outside. Myra's eyes held the weight of unspoken truths, and her presence was a tether to reality. Lady Eloan, she breathed, the words trembling like leaves caught in a storm. They're demanding you. Demanding her. Not for counsel or guidance, but for sacrifice. What do they want? The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The girl's gaze fell, a silent admission. Blood. Blood. The word collided with Eloan's heart, echoing like the tolling of a death knell. They would spill innocent blood to appease their anger. Disbelief wrapped around her like a shroud, suffocating and cold. She thought of the children, their laughter ringing like chimes in the air, and the dread that this madness could consume them too. I remember, she whispered, when I thought I could change the world. Eloan stepped back, her hands trembling against the stone wall, the weight of her title pressing down like a boulder. To be a lady was to wear a crown not of jewels, but of thorns, a dolorous reminder of her duties. She trembled, battling the urge to flee, to hide from the storm brewing outside. But she was no coward, she had to face this tempest head-on, not as a queen cloaked in silk but as a woman forged by fire. Myra's voice broke through her reverie. My lady, we must act quickly. The urgency in her tone stirred something deep within Eloan. They'll come for you first. You're their symbol. Symbol. The word echoed with a dark resonance. She was both the beacon and the target, a representation of hope twisted into an effigy of blame. I cannot let them take me, she breathed, each word a promise to herself. I will not become a martyr for their despair. The shadows in the room seemed to thicken, swirling around her like sorrowful spirits. She turned to Myra, her heart pounding. We must gather the loyalists. We can't let them turn this into a bloodbath. Who remains loyal, my lady? Myra's voice trembled, the reality settling like frost on a fragile flower. Your husband has led them astray. He will listen to reason, Eloan said, though doubt gnawed at her. I know he will. But as the words left her lips, the weight of truth pressed heavily against her chest. Cedric had always been a man of ambition, seduced by the call of power and the sweet poison of adulation. Cedric, his name felt like a blade against her heart, raw and aching. What if he has turned against us? The thought was a shuddering whisper, a ghost that haunted her. On the brink of a battle, her husband, her once beloved, stood as a wild card in this deadly game. Would he protect her, or would he cast her aside for the promise of peace? I remember the day he proposed, she breathed, and for a moment, the chaos receded like the tide, leaving only a soft glow of warmth. The sun kissed the horizon, and I thought I could change the world. She had believed in fairy tales, in love that could conquer all. How naive she had been. But the shadows were creeping back, and the din outside grew louder. We must prepare, she said, her voice steadier now. She was a lady, yes, but she was more than that, she was a mother, a protector, an unwilling warrior. Gather whatever weapons we can find, and rally the few who remain loyal. We fight not for glory but for survival. And as she spoke, she felt the flickering flame of hope reignite within her, a fierce and indomitable fire. The battle for her castle was only just beginning, and in the heart of darkness, she would find the strength to stand her ground. The night was coming, and with it, the whispers of fate and destiny, lingering just beyond the threshold. The sky was stained with the fiery hues of sunset. Smoke curled into the air like the tendrils of a nightmare refusing to let go. A village lay in ruins, its blooded earth a testament to chaos, the cries of the injured piercing the silence like daggers. I stood amidst the wreckage, heart pounding, a hollow echo of despair reverberating within me. Flames danced in the distance, illuminating the faces of the fallen, flickering shadows of lives extinguished too soon. I remember the first time I saw a battlefield. The ground was littered with the weight of dreams unfulfilled, hopes crushed beneath the boots of men, no, beasts, driven by ambition and thirst for power. And here I was, Eric, the Lord of the North, the reluctant king with a crown that felt heavier than iron, wrestling with the ghosts of my choices. I remember standing amidst the carnage, the acrid stench of burnt flesh clawing at my throat, choking back bile, and in that moment, I realized I was alive, yet I was nothing. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the burden of leadership, the unrelenting responsibility that seeped into my bones. I looked to my left. There was Lyra, her fiery spirit dimmed, eyes wide with horror, blood smeared across her cheek in a morbid war paint. She was my commander, a fierce lioness tethered by the chains of loyalty and loss, struggling against the tide of a broken world. "We can't stay here," she said, breathless, voice trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. "They'll come for us. Come for us." The words echoed in my mind, a warning and a promise. But the real enemy was not the swords that clashed around us, it was the justice I failed to deliver. I had sworn to protect the innocent, yet here I was, standing amid the ruins, powerless, watching them bleed out into the earth. The villagers, once vibrant and alive, now mere shadows, fading into the dusk. I remembered their laughter, their simple joys, cooking over open fires, children playing, love whispered under starlit skies. And now? Just ash and memory. Lyra's hand gripped my wrist, pulling me back to the present. "We need to regroup. We have wounded." Her voice, usually so commanding, wavered. "If we don't find shelter," I couldn't bear to think of the IFS. The air thickened with desperation, the cries of the fallen echoing in my ears, a haunting lullaby of regret. My gaze was drawn to the horizon, where shadows loomed, dark and ominous, a promise of more bloodshed, more heartache. And then there was Kale, my brother. A wild spirit, fierce and unyielding, yet tethered by his own demons. He had always craved glory, the thrill of combat like a moth to the flame. I remember the thrill of his laughter, the reckless abandon in his eyes when he spoke of battles won and enemies vanquished. But today, his bravado was replaced by a grim determination. He emerged from the smoke, covered in soot and blood, eyes fierce yet haunted. "They're gathering, Eric. The enemy, do we fight?" I dared to ask, my voice barely a whisper, the weight of that question suffocating. "Or do we flee?" A silence enveloped us, thick and suffocating, as if the universe itself held its breath. Lyra's eyes met mine, a flicker of understanding passing between us. We had fought for justice, for a world that felt safe, yet it all felt like a cruel joke, laughter echoing in the void. Kale's voice broke through the haze. "We don't run from this." His words were iron, yet I saw the flicker of doubt in his gaze. "If we run, we lose everything. They won't stop until they've taken our home, our lives." I could see it, our people, our families, consumed by this insatiable hunger for power, caught in the crossfire of a war that had spiraled out of control. But how could I lead them? How could I, a man who felt more like a ghost than a king, command others to face the flames? My heart ached, a wrenching pull that echoed the devastation around us. "We have to make a choice," Lyra urged, her voice steady, even as fear shimmered in her eyes. "Warfare is brutal, but justice is the heart of our fight. If we don't stand for them, we become like the very monsters we despise." Her words burned in my chest, igniting something deep within. I thought of the villagers, of their laughter silenced, of dreams cut short. The shadows seemed to dance in the corners of my vision, whispering vile truths. If we fight, we may lose everything. But if we do nothing, we've already lost. The weight of her words settled around me, heavy as a storm cloud pregnant with thunder. "Eric, we must choose," Kale said, his voice a low growl, his eyes fierce with intent. "The time for hesitation is over." I stood there, two paths stretching out before me, one soaked in blood and vengeance, the other shrouded in uncertainty yet pulsing with hope. I could feel the heart of my kingdom, the pulse of its people, thrumming beneath the surface like a restless phantasm. Then we fight. The word slipped from my lips, raw and electric, igniting a fire within me. Lyra nodded, determination flashing in her gaze. Cale grinned, that reckless smile I had loved since childhood, as if daring the shadows to come for us. The air crackled with tension, with a fierce resolve that felt almost tangible, like the promise of lightning before a storm. And in that moment, as the echoes of battle rang in the distance, I knew. I could not allow fear to consume me, nor the weight of my crown to crush my spirit. The Lord's responsibilities had never been about power, they were about sacrifice, about standing tall even when the ground beneath your feet trembled. We turned toward the horizon, toward the sounds of impending conflict, hearts pounding like war drums. The night was vast and unyielding, but in that darkness, I felt the flicker of something brighter, hope, perhaps, or just the fragile spark of defiance. The battle loomed ahead, vast and daunting. I felt the chill of inevitability wrap around me, whispering of regret and glory all at once. And as we moved forward into the chaos, I knew that whatever awaited us, we would face it together, three souls intertwined by fate, bound by the relentless pursuit of justice in a world that had forgotten its meaning. The shadows danced closer, the air grew thick with tension, but we would not falter. We would not be mere ghosts in this world. The door creaked open, the sound sharp and jarring, slicing through the suffocating silence of the servants' quarters. I could hear the distant clink of silverware in the grand dining room above, laughter spilling like wine from unseen mouths. But down here, the shadows held their breath, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to break the fragile peace or for the truth to claw its way to the surface. The air was thick with unspoken fears and hidden desires, a tension that thrummed like a taut string ready to snap. Anna stood at the sink, her hand submerged in murky water, scrubbing away at the remnants of someone else's meal. The skin on her knuckles was cracked and raw, a testament to the hours of hard labor. She didn't flinch when the coldness of the water bit into her flesh. No, she was thinking of Samuel. I knew it because I couldn't stop thinking about him either. His broad shoulders, the way he smiled, his laughter like a summer day, bright and warm, but now a shadow of itself, dimmed by the weight of unfulfilled dreams. He worked in the stables, mucking out horses, a fate far from the grand adventures his heart yearned for. "Anna," I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. Her dark eyes flicked up to meet mine, a storm brewing behind them. "Are you okay?" "Okay," she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "We're servants, aren't we? How could we possibly be okay?" She pulled her hands from the water, droplets cascading down her arms like tears, unwanted, unacknowledged, yet so very real. "It's always the same, isn't it? Scrub, sweep, serve, repeat. But if you look closely, there's a dance in the chaos." I wanted to see that dance, wanted to understand how she could find it amidst this existence, where sunlight was a mere rumor and our dreams felt like ghosts. Footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway, heavy and deliberate. I felt my heart quicken. It was Mr. Thompson, the butler, an iron fist cloaked in civility. I could already see the tension coiling around Anna's frame. "You can't let him see you like this," I urged, knowing the truth. The masters above, they never saw us, never acknowledged our sweat, our tears. "You have to smile." She rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of something, determination, perhaps. It was fleeting but enough to quench the fire of my own despair. "Smile," she whispered, the word a bitter berry on her tongue. I remember when I thought it meant something. I remember when hope was more than a whisper in a dark room. The door swung open, the light from the hallway spilling into our confines like a priest announcing a sermon. Mr. Thompson's gaze cut through the space, dissecting it with the precision of a surgeon. "What are you two doing?" "The dining room is waiting." I felt the heat creeping up my spine, the weight of shame. "Just finishing up, sir," I managed to say, though it tasted like ash. "Finish quickly." His voice was ice, yet the warmth of malice dripped from each syllable. "The lady of the house requires more champagne." And remember, his gaze bore into Anna, a servant's worth is measured by their ability to be unseen. As he turned, I saw the flash of something in Anna's eyes, defiance or resignation, I couldn't tell. But in that moment, I felt her pain like a knife twisting in my own heart. "What is it that they think we are?" she murmured once the door clicked shut. "Nothing more than shadows. Will we ever be more?" "I remember the stories," I said, grasping at fragments of hope. "The tales of brave heroes and epic quests. Maybe we can be more, too." "But we aren't heroes," she shot back, her voice low and fierce. "We're the ghosts that linger, unseen and unheard. We live in their stories, but we don't have one of our own." My stomach twisted at her words. The truth was like a shroud, suffocating. Outside, the moon hung heavy and low, a ghostly witness to our plight. I imagined it watching us, a silent observer in the dark. It reminded me of the old clock in the hallway, each tick a reminder of the moment slipping away, time slipping like water through fingers. "Let's not let it slip away," I whispered, anchored by the weight of her gaze. "Let's carve out a story of our own, even if it's only in whispers." But I felt the doubt creeping back, clawing at my resolve. Above, the laughter continued, a cruel echo of lives lived without us. The grand world of the masters, a world unfathomably distant, yet so close I could almost taste the wine on my lips. Suddenly, the door swung open again, this time gripped by urgency. It was Samuel, his face pale, eyes wide and frantic. "They're in trouble," he breathed, the words crashing through the still air like thunder. "The lady, she's been taken ill." A gasp escaped Anna's lips, and I felt the room shift, the weight of fear pressing down like a heavy blanket. "What do you mean?" I demanded, my heart pounding like a war drum. "Something's wrong. I overheard the doctor, they say it's serious." "If she," his voice trailed off, leaving an unbearable silence. "Then what?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. There was something raw in her question, a flicker of hope fighting against despair. "If she dies, they'll need us." The words hung heavy in the air, an uninvited truth that twisted like a knife in my gut. We were not people to them, we were tools, cogs in a machine of privilege. But in that moment, I felt something shift within me, a spark igniting deep in my chest. It was terrifying and beautiful, a promise of possibility. "Let's do what we do best," I said, the words spilling out with a fervor I didn't know I possessed. "Let's prepare. Let's show them we're more than shadows." Anna's eyes caught mine, the fire of determination igniting once more, and for the first time, I felt the weight of the moment shift. We were in this together, three souls bound by a shared fate, standing on the precipice of something greater. The air crackled with possibility, and as I swept past the threshold into the darkened corridor, I realized that we were not just the unseen, we were the storm brewing beneath the surface, ready to unleash our fury upon a world that had forgotten our names. And somewhere, deep down, a part of me knew that this was not the end but merely the beginning, a heartbeat echoing in the dark, leading us toward a confrontation that would change everything. The kitchen was a beast. It breathed, it roared, and on that fateful night, it howled. Smoke curled like dark tendrils, choking the air, as the flames devoured the meat hanging from iron hooks, the scent of char mingling with the acrid tang of sweat. Laughter echoed, a haunting melody that danced with the flickering shadows cast by the flames. But beneath that mirth was an undercurrent, a tremor of fear that rattled the pots and pans, bouncing from wall to wall until it settled deep in the gut. Muriel stood at the heart of the chaos, hands trembling as she stirred the boiling pot of broth, her fingers wrapped tightly around the wooden spoon, knuckles white with anxiety. Each bubble that burst against the rim felt like a judgment, a reminder of her inadequacies. The firelight illuminated her face, revealing the smudges of flour across her cheeks, a mask of a cook, a warrior in her own right, fighting the demons of her past with every ladleful of broth. I remember the warmth of the hearth, the laughter of my mother," she whispered to herself, torn between the memory of home and the looming shadow of the castle where she now toiled. The echoes of childhood dreams hung in the air, ghostly whispers of a life before the stone walls, before the oppressive weight of expectation crushed her spirit. There was solace in the kitchen, yes, but also a prison. "Muriel! Hurry! The feast awaits!" A voice like thunder crashed through her thoughts. Alaric, the head cook, stormed into the kitchen, his presence a whirlwind of energy. He was a man of paradox. His jovial laughter could easily turn into a growl, his kindness often laced with a cruel edge. "We can't afford mistakes tonight. The Lord's guests are arriving, and if you wish to keep your head upon your shoulders, you'll make sure they are pleased." The way he spoke, as if her shortcomings were a dagger poised at her throat, sent a shiver down her spine. She could feel the weight of the Lord's gaze, his expectations pressing down like a heavy cloak. She glanced at the door, half expecting to see the shadows of the past creeping in, faces of those lost to time and sorrow. "I'll do my best," she managed, but even her voice sounded hollow, echoing in the vastness of the kitchen. Alaric's eyes flickered, a momentary flash of something softer before hardening again. "Your best won't do. Not tonight." With that, he turned, the heavy cloak of authority trailing behind him like a dark omen. Outside, the revelers gathered, a cacophony of laughter and music spilling through the gates, mingling with the scent of roasted meats and spiced wines. It was a celebration, a feast to mark the Lord's triumph. Yet within Meriel, a storm brewed, a tempest of doubt and despair. The kitchen was a world unto itself, a realm of boiling pots and flaring tempers, where laughter felt like a mirage flickering just beyond reach. "I remember," she began again, but the memories betrayed her, shifting like the smoke that hung thick in the air. Then, in a moment of reckless abandon, her eyes caught sight of a figure slipping through the shadows, a woman cloaked in tattered rags. The kitchen swallowed the sight, but Meriel's heart seized. It was Celia, the kitchen maid, once a friend, now a spectre of her former self. Meriel felt a pang, an ache that throbbed like a wound opened too soon. Celia's laughter had once been a balm, a sweet song amidst the clatter and crash, but now it was a tragic echo of loss, a reminder that the dungeon walls of the castle could swallow even the brightest of spirits whole. "Celia!" Meriel called, desperation clawing at her throat. But the figure vanished, absorbed into the shadows, leaving only an empty space behind, a ghost that reminded Meriel of the fragility of joy, the way it could slip through fingers like grains of sand. The kitchen throbbed on, relentless, an engine of chaos. A pot boiled over, sending a scalding splash across her arm, and she gasped, the pain sharp and electric, a punishment for her wandering thoughts. "Focus," she screamed at herself, but the words felt like a lifeline tossed into a stormy sea. The laughter outside swelled, a mocking tide that threatened to drown her resolve. "Meriel! The meats!" Alaric barked, the urgency in his voice pulling her back. She turned to the table, a battlefield of garnishes and side dishes, and her heart raced. Each plate, each carefully arranged dish, was a piece of herself laid bare. But beneath the surface, beneath the laughter and the clinking of goblets, the atmosphere thickened, gathering like dark clouds on the horizon. She could sense the peril, the whispers of betrayal mingling with the scent of roast fowl, distant, sinister murmurs that echoed through the halls. The Lord's guests were not merely revelers, they were poised like vultures, hungry for more than just food. "I remember," she started again, but the words faltered, caught in the web of uncertainty. The banquet hall, adorned with lavish tapestries and flickering candles, was a world of feasting and festivity. Yet Meriel felt the weight of each morsel she prepared, a burden that pressed upon her chest like the iron chains of the damned. She held a platter of roasted quail, the glistening flesh promising delight, but she could taste the bitterness of dread. Each bite could be a celebration or a curse, it all depended on the whims of fate, that fickle beast. Outside the kitchen, the distant strains of music blended with darker tones, laughter morphing into harsh shouts, the dance of knives glinting ominously under the candlelight. Meriel felt the kitchen tremble, the walls trembling with secrets she was not privy to. There was something brewing, a storm ready to break, and she was caught in the eye of it, heart racing like a drumbeat in the dark. The hours bled together, a blur of heat and noise, of laughter that felt like a fragile mask over a growing horror. And then, just as her spirit began to flicker like a dying flame, a pair of eyes met hers across the bustling kitchen, Celia, standing in the doorway, a ghost of hope. But her expression was twisted, a grimace of warning rather than camaraderie. Meriel's heart plummeted. The night was far from over, the feast only just beginning. The kitchen rumbled, the castle held its breath, and she could feel the weight of destiny crash down like a storm upon the cliffs. I remember, she murmured, but this time the words felt heavy, burdened with all the ghosts of the past, all the regret she hadn't yet faced. The kitchen was alive, a creature of its own, and as the door swung open to let in the throngs of revelers, it roared once more, hungry for the feast, craving the chaos that was to come. And Muriel stood at the heart of it, caught between fire and shadow, between laughter and screams, as the banquet began to weave its dark tapestry, each thread a tale waiting to be told. I remember the moment the sun vanished behind the castle walls, the day turning dark with the weight of impending doom. Shadows stretched like fingers across the garden, grasping at the last vestiges of light. The air smelled of damp earth and desperation, a stench that clung to my throat, making it hard to breathe. The once vibrant garden, teeming with life, now echoed a haunting silence that seeped into my bones. The wind rustled through the leaves, whispering secrets of decay, of hard-fought battles lost against an invisible foe. Elena knelt before the dying rosebush, her fingers trembling as she brushed the fragile petals, wilted and brown. "How could this happen?" she murmured, her voice cracking under the weight of her grief. The garden had been her sanctuary, a lush oasis within these cold, unforgiving stone walls. Now, it was a graveyard of dreams, where once there had been laughter and color, where she had tended to each bloom as if they were her children. "I remember," she whispered, "when these roses danced in the breeze, when their scent filled the air like a promise." But that promise was now a ghost, haunting her every thought. The castle had fallen under the curse of famine, and the ground, once generous, now lay bare. The pantry echoed with emptiness, each shelf a reminder of their dwindling supplies. The laughter of the court had turned into whispers of dread, each meal a grim game of survival. Elena's heart, a drum of despair, beat wildly as she gripped the soil, feeling the lifeblood of her garden slipping through her fingers like sand. Across the garden, Thomas stood, arms crossed tightly against his chest, a wall of defiance against the chaos that had overtaken their home. His eyes, usually bright with mischief, were clouded with worry. "We need to do something, Elena," he said, his voice a low growl, barely above a whisper. "We can't just sit here and watch everything die." The urgency in his tone cut through the air like a knife, and for a moment, silence reigned as Elena looked up, meeting his gaze. "I remember when you used to sneak in here at dawn, trying to steal my herbs," she said, a smile almost breaking through her sorrow. "You thought I wouldn't notice." The memory played like a film reel, the laughter, the playfulness, the moments untouched by the harsh reality of the castle's decline. But that laughter felt like a distant echo, fading into the shadows of the past. Thomas shifted, the tension coiling around him like a noose. "We can't afford to be sentimental anymore. We need to plant more, to find a way to keep this alive. If we don't," his voice cracked, fear clawing at his insides. "If we don't, we'll starve. You know what that means." The unsaid hung between them like a heavy fog, a reminder of the horrors that awaited them if they failed. The garden felt alive, pulsating with every heartbeat, every pang of uncertainty. Each rustle of leaves carried the weight of their dreams, their lives hanging in the balance. But amidst the darkness, something flickered in Elena's chest, a stubborn ember, a refusal to let go. She stood abruptly, her decision made, igniting an unexpected spark. "Then we fight," she said, her voice rising as determination transformed her sorrow into strength. "We fight for every seed, every drop of rain. We'll make this garden rise again, even if it means clawing through the dirt with our bare hands." A smile broke through Thomas's grim facade, a glimmer of hope amidst the ashes. "I remember the stories my father told me," he said, stepping closer. "How gardens like this once fed entire cities. We can bring it back. We can become the saviors of our own tale." His words, laced with passion, ignited a fire in her heart, a shared dream that intertwined their fates. But as they plotted their revival, shadows loomed larger around them, figures in the back alleys of the castle whispering of despair, of betrayal, of the price of survival. There were those who would do anything for a crumb, even if it meant sacrificing their own. The thought twisted in Elena's gut, a reminder that hope often came at a cost. As night fell, they began their work, hands clawing at the earth, digging deep into the soil, each shovelful a battle cry against fate. The moon cast an eerie glow, illuminating their determination but also the shadows that lurked just beyond the reach of light. Every grunt of effort echoed through the darkness, a desperate rhythm against the encroaching silence. And then came the sound, the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel, the sharp inhalation of breath. Thomas froze, eyes darting, and Elena felt her heart leap into her throat. They were not alone. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within. The garden, their sanctuary, had become a battleground, and fear wrapped around her like a vice. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in darkness, features obscured but intent clear as day, a thief, perhaps, or worse. "You think this garden can save you?" the intruder mocked, laughter dripping with disdain. "You're fools to believe you can defy the hunger that's taken this castle. You're fighting a losing battle." The words struck like arrows, each one piercing their fragile resolve. But as the figure stepped closer, something shifted within Elena. She would not cower, would not let despair snuff out the flicker of hope igniting within her. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice a steady flame against the chill that gripped the air. "This garden is more than dirt and seeds. It is life. And we will fight for it." The confrontation hung heavy between them, the night thick with tension, yet in that moment, something profound blossomed, an understanding that this was more than survival, it was a declaration, a rebellion against the darkness threatening to swallow them whole. As the figure retreated into the night, Elena and Thomas stood resolute, the garden around them a silent witness to their shared dream. The battle had only begun, but each heartbeat echoed with a promise, rich with the scent of possibility. They would sow their hopes into the earth, nurture them with their very souls, and perhaps, just perhaps, they would breathe life back into the castle once more. In the stillness that followed, the garden seemed to hum, a melody of resilience woven through the soil. Every plant, every seed held a story, a whispered memory of struggle and triumph. The weight of the darkness remained, but it mingled with the pulse of life, a stark reminder that even in the depths of despair, hope could take root, strong and unyielding. And as they began to plant once more, the stars above shimmered, tiny pinpricks of light illuminating the shadows, a cosmic choir singing their own tale of survival against insurmountable odds. The hammer echoes through the workshop like a heartbeat, a relentless pulse that fills the air with tension. It strikes steel, bending it to the craftsman's will, and each blow reverberates like a cry for survival. Dust motes swirl in the rays of sunlight that slice through cracks in the wooden walls, but there's no time for reflection, no moment for joy. This is the forge, the crucible where dreams and desperation collide. I remember the day the world washed away in flames. The riot was a tempest, voices raised like daggers, anger spilling over the cobblestones. But here, in this sanctuary of sweat and steel, it was just him, Ronan, his brow furrowed in concentration, the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. The anvil was his confessor, the only one who could bear the burden of his secrets. He shaped swords and horseshoes alike, but none could cut deeper than the guilt nested in his heart. Then there was Ilara, her fingers stained with dye and clay, spinning dreams into existence. She was a weaver, a conjurer of tapestries, each thread a whisper of her soul. The walls of her workshop were adorned with vibrant colors, patterns swirling like the cosmos. But amidst the beauty, shadows lingered. She felt the chains of tradition tightening around her throat like a noose, dragging her down into the depths of despair. The elders demanded perfection, but every stitch bore the weight of her inadequacy. And in the corner of her mind, always lurking Imarek, the merchant, slick with the sheen of ambition. He didn't craft with his hands but with his words, weaving deals as if they were tapestries, entangling others in his dreams of wealth. He saw artisans as mere cogs in his grand machine, tools to fatten his pockets. But even he, with his polished veneer, felt the cracks beneath the surface, the fear of being exposed, of the truth bleeding through the facade. The way he could feel Ilara's eyes on him, the disdain simmering like a pot on the verge of boiling over. The day the fire ignited the marketplace, it was chaos, a cacophony of screams mingling with the crackle of flames. I remember standing amidst it, the acrid smoke clawing at my throat, choking on the reality that had just twisted into a nightmare. Ronan's forge, Ilara's sanctuary, all threatened to be consumed. And there was Marek, shouting orders, trying to salvage what he could, but the weight of his greed was pulling him under like an anchor. "You think this is a game?" Ronan shouted, his voice lost among the chaos. You think you can just barter lives away? The hammer dropped from his hand, clattering to the ground, a symbol of his surrender. The flames danced, and shadows flickered, swallowing the remnants of their ambitions. I'm not a pawn in your game. Ilara's voice pierced the air, raw and trembling. She stepped forward, defiance woven into her spirit. Her tapestries had spoken truths, but now, in this moment, they were mere echoes of a life once vibrant, now shrouded in smoke. We are not your tools. Marek's eyes flickered, darting between the two artisans, each a mirror reflecting his own fears. He could feel the weight of their gazes, could sense the unraveling of the facade he had carefully constructed. This isn't my fault. I'm trying to save us, he shouted, but desperation echoed hollow against their resolve. The fire crackled, consuming the remnants of a world built on dreams, on craftsmanship and trade that had once thrived. The artistry that once bound them began to fray, threads snapping under the heat of emotion. I could feel the weight of their histories pressing down, memories clawing to the surface, the laughter shared over a shared meal, the quiet moments when art became a sanctuary, a soul laid bare. I remember the night they each spoke their truths, Ronan, the weight of his past bearing down like the anvil he hammered on, Ilara, trapped in a cycle of expectation that twisted her spirit into knots, Marek, whose ambition had turned him into a ghost of himself. They were artisans, yes, but far more than that, they were human, flawed and imperfect, trying to craft meaning in a world that often felt like chaos. The shadows swirled, the flames crackled, and I felt my heart race as they stood on the precipice of confrontation. Would they succumb to the flames of division, or could they rise like the phoenix from the ashes of their despair? Together, Ronan's voice trembled, a fragile thread of hope weaving through the turmoil. We can reconstruct. We can create something that stands against this chaos. Tears glimmered in Ilara's eyes, reflecting the flames, the fire that could either destroy or forge anew. Are we not more than our trades? She whispered, her voice barely audible against the crackle of destruction. Can we not craft a future that honors us all? Marek stepped back, the relentless tide of ambition clashing with a sudden awareness of their shared humanity. For the first time, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The shadows of greed flickered, and in that moment, he saw the artisans not as tools but as equals, each creating beauty amidst the wreckage. The fire raged on, but within the chaos, a spark ignited, a resolve forged in the crucible of pain and hope. And as the flames consumed the old, the artisans stood resolute, poised to craft a future together, illuminated by the flickering light of their connection. I remember the heartbeat of that moment, the weight of breath as they stepped into the unknown. The forge, the loom, the marketplace, they would rise, reborn from the ashes, each carrying the scars of their past, but with eyes set on a horizon shimmering with possibilities. The world outside might have burned, but within them lay the strength to create, to resist, and to transform despair into artistry. As I watch, breath held tight in my chest, I know this is only the beginning, the first strokes on a canvas yet to be painted. The craftsmanship of their lives intertwines like threads of a tapestry, and as they grasp each other's hands, I can almost hear the heartbeat of a new world stirring to life, waiting to be shaped, waiting for the artisans to unleash their fire upon it once more. The bell tolls, a single note that reverberates through the ancient stone walls of the castle chapel, a ghostly echo that seems to reach deep into the marrow of the night. Each chime is a pulse, a heartbeat, a clock striking an hour laden with dread. Inside the chapel, shadows shift like whispers, cloaking the faces of the gathered souls in a shroud of uncertainty. This is the hour of prayer, the sacred ritual that binds the living to the ethereal, yet tonight, an unsettling tension hangs in the air, a premonition of something unspeakable. I watch as Helena kneels on the cold, unforgiving stones, her rosary bead slipping through her trembling fingers like grains of sand through an hourglass. I remember the fervor in her eyes, the fervor of someone desperately clinging to faith in a world that feels more and more like a fever dream. She is a fortress of doubt, standing against a tide of despair, yet her heart beats with the rhythm of a fragile butterfly, fluttering desperately against the storm. Across the chapel, Father Matthias stands at the altar, his voice like thunder, strong yet wavering, invoking the eternal. His hands tremble, not from age but from the weight of unconfessed sins and burdens too heavy to bear. I remember when his laughter filled the hallways, a sound so rich and open like a door swung wide. Now, his face is a mask of shadows, the flickering candles casting a hellish glow that makes each wrinkle look like a passage of lost faith. He is haunted, and I wonder if he sees them too, the specters of lives lost, prayers unanswered. The flickering torchlight dances with the shadows, painting the walls with stories of the past. I think of the night sky and the stars that once guided sailors, now dimmed by the smoke of despair. Every flicker feels like a heartbeat, every crackle of the flames a reminder of life's fragility. The chapel, once a sanctuary, now feels like a tomb, and I can hear the whispers of ghosts lingering, their presence thick as fog. And then, the air shifts, thickening with a tension that feels almost alive. A hushed gasp travels through the crowd like wildfire, a figure cloaked in black appears at the back of the chapel. Eyes widen, hearts race. Is it a spirit? A harbinger of doom? Or merely a trick of the light? I can feel the collective breath held tight in throats, the silence so profound it deafens. Helena looks up, her eyes reflecting the candlelight, a mix of fear and hope. I remember the countless nights she had shared her dreams with me, dreams of a world where faith triumphs over fear, where love shines brighter than the darkest woes. But tonight, with that figure looming, all her dreams seem to waver like the very flames that light our way. Father Mattia steps forward, voice trembling but resolute. He calls out, "Who dares to enter?" His words echo in the vastness, and the figure pauses, a silhouette veiled in enigma. A heartbeat passes. The air feels charged, electric, raw with the potential for something, fear, revelation, perhaps even redemption. I am the keeper of sorrow, the figure intones, a voice rich and haunting, slicing through the silence like a knife through flesh. The words linger, heavy with foreboding, each syllable a reminder of the pain we carry. The congregation shudders, a collective intake of breath, a sea of faces turning pale under the weight of truth. Each is grappling with their own despair, their own sins, their own longings. Helena's fingers curl tighter around her rosary, knuckles white against the dark. Her eyes shine, not with hope but with a yearning to understand the sorrow that binds us all. She rises, a warrior in the face of despair, and steps forward, her voice breaking free from the chains of doubt. "What do you seek from us?" The figure, cloaked in shadows, tilts its head slightly, as if weighing her words. "I come not to take, but to reveal." The air thickens, an invisible weight pressing down, and momentarily, I see the flicker of truth in Helena's eyes, a flash of recognition. She knows, she feels it, this is not just a ritual, this is a reckoning. Father Mattia stands frozen, the color draining from his face, his faith shaking like the flame of a candle in the wind. He had preached of salvation, of light overcoming darkness. But what happens when that darkness stands before you, demanding to be acknowledged? Can faith withstand such confrontation? In this chamber of echoes and secrets, time loses its meaning. I remember the stories passed down through generations, tales of sacrifice, of the divine, of the trials that test the very marrow of our souls. But what is divine in a moment like this, when salvation feels like a distant shore, unreachable, lost in the fog? The figure moves closer, gliding rather than walking, a spectre of sorrow unfurling like a dark cloud. The candles flicker wildly, as if reacting to its presence, and I can feel the chapel holding its breath, collective fears rising to the surface. The shadows seem to whisper secrets, tales of lost battles and broken dreams. Helena's voice trembles but remains fierce. "We are not afraid of sorrow. We have known it." The words hang heavy, thick with the weight of truth. They resonate through the chapel walls, a challenge thrown into the abyss of uncertainty. The figure pauses, and for a brief moment, I think I see something shift in its depths, a flicker of recognition. Is it fear? Pity? Or a reflection of our own pain? In that instant, we are no longer three separate souls in a grand cathedral, we are one, intertwined in our shared struggle against despair, against the encroaching darkness. As the figure's gaze meets ours, I feel the world tilt, time stretching thin. A single heartbeat, a breath drawn in unison, silence falling like a heavy blanket, suffocating yet strangely comforting. We stand on the precipice, teetering between faith and fear, light and shadow, life and death. And then it begins, a reckoning, a communion of sorrow and strength. The chapel becomes an altar of raw emotion, where prayers are not just whispered but screamed into the void. The echoes will linger, trapped in the stones, cradling the weight of all that has been, all that might yet come. In this moment, as the clock ticks on, time feels both infinite and fleeting, a tormenting reminder that our rituals, sacred and flawed, bind us together in ways we can barely comprehend. And the bell tolls again, a clarion call that pierces the heart, for the night is far from over, and the battle is just beginning. The echo of a bell tolled deep within the castle, reverberating off the ancient stone walls like a heartbeat, a grim reminder that time was fleeting. I clutched my parchment tightly, fingers trembling, the ink smudging under the weight of my anxiety. Outside, the wind howled like a banshee, rattling the narrow windows as if trying to escape the horrors held within. This castle, our sanctuary and our prison, was alive with shadows, each corner a whisper of the past, each creak of the floorboards an invitation to remember. "Look at you, Tilda," a voice sliced through the tension, sharp and mocking. It was Rowan, his eyes glinting with mischief as he leaned against the crumbling stone wall, arms crossed. "Still clutching your notes? You know you can't learn anything from a piece of paper when your stomach's in knots." He laughed, a sound that echoed like a ghost trapped between laughter and sorrow. My heart raced. It was true. The weight of my insecurities pressed down harder than the armor of a knight. I wanted to be brave, to stand up against the looming darkness of uncertainty, but every breath felt like a betrayal. I glanced at Rowan, the embodiment of carefree confidence, and felt the prick of jealousy. He was everything I wasn't, wild, unrestrained, a spark in the abyss of our dreary existence. "Why are you even here?" "You're the last person who should worry about lessons," I shot back, my voice trembling like the leaves in a storm. "You'd rather play the fool than learn the art of swordplay." He shrugged, his casual demeanor a mask for the deeper scars I could sense beneath. "Better a fool with a smile than a scholar with a frown, Tilda. What's the point of knowledge if you can't enjoy the ride?" As if to punctuate his words, thunder rumbled ominously outside, shaking the very foundations of our refuge. The echoes of treachery and betrayal seeped through the walls, reminding us of the lessons we'd rather forget. Outside, the spectre of our world loomed, a city haunted by the ghosts of a forgotten past and a future that felt as brittle as the parchment in my hands. A scream pierced the air, a shattering note that sliced through the fabric of our conversation. It didn't take long for word to spread, a fellow student had been caught in the castle's labyrinth, lost among the shadows. My stomach twisted as the reality hit me, this castle was more than just a training ground. It was a tomb of ambition, a graveyard where dreams went to die. My mind raced, grasping for fragments of courage. I remembered the lessons, the whispers of the tutors, the warnings wrapped in riddles and metaphors. They spoke of perseverance, of facing the dark corners of our souls. But how could one learn when terror was the uninvited guest? Rowan pushed away from the wall, urgency igniting his eyes. "We have to find them," he declared, though I noted the tremor in his voice. He was brave, yes, but even bravery has its cracks. Together, we rushed through dim corridors, the air thick with dust and unspoken fears. The castle was a labyrinth, twisted and ancient, full of secrets that clung to the walls like cobwebs. I could feel the weight of every whisper, every footstep echoing our dread. "This way!" I shouted, my voice breaking against the silence as we rounded a corner. We stumbled into a chamber, the flickering torchlight revealing faces twisted in shadows, eyes wide with fear. A girl lay sprawled on the floor, her breath shallow, a fragile flicker of life. My heart ached, not just for her, but for the realization that we were all teetering on the edge of despair, every lesson we learned a reminder of our mortality. "Help me!" I cried, kneeling by her side, the parchment slipping from my hands, forgotten. The world around me faded, replaced by the intensity of the moment. I could feel Rowan's presence, his uncertainty mingling with a fierce determination. "Stay with us, please," I begged, my voice raw. The girl's eyes flitted open, filled with confusion, and in that moment, I saw my own fears reflected back at me, an abyss filled with uncertainty and darkness. Rowan's hands trembled as he reached to lift her, his strength faltering under the weight of our shared dread. "We can do this," he whispered, a mantra against the chaos that threatened to swallow us whole. "We have to believe we can do this." As we carried her through the winding corridors, the castle felt alive, every stone watching, every shadow breathing. The atmosphere thickened, suffocating, each second stretching into eternity. I could taste the fear in the air, bitter and metallic, and with every heartbeat, I fought to suppress my own rising panic. Just breathe, I muttered under my breath, my own voice a fragile lifeline. The lessons we learned echoed in my mind: fear is a cage, but courage is a key. We were not just training for battle, we were learning to confront the demons that dwelled within. The castle groaned around us, a dark symphony of despair, but I clutched that key tightly. Rowan's determination, the girl's flickering spirit, and my own fragile hope intertwined, creating a bond stronger than the walls that surrounded us. It was in that moment, amid the chaos and uncertainty, that I understood. Education was not just about knowledge or skill, it was about survival, about forging connections in the darkest of times. And then, as if the castle itself held its breath, we burst into the courtyard. The night sky loomed above, a vast canvas painted with stars that felt impossibly far away. The air snapped with tension, and for a heartbeat, everything was still. It was the pause before the storm, the moment before the inevitable confrontation with our fears. In that silence, I found clarity. The lessons we had learned, of bravery, of heartache, of sacrifice, would shape who we were. There would be no easy resolution tonight. The darkness lingered, a reminder that knowledge was often wrapped in sorrow. But with Rowan by my side and the flicker of hope in my heart, I felt ready to face whatever came next. We would keep learning, keep fighting, because in this castle of shadows, the light of knowledge was the only beacon we could trust. The clang of metal strikes the air like a bell tolling for the damned, echoing through the dusty, sunlit streets of the village. Bodies throng the square, their faces painted with a blend of excitement and dread, the pulse of the crowd a living thing, thrumming in time with the beating of my heart. Jousting, they said, an honor, a spectacle, a dance of death. I stand there, my throat dry, the taste of fear and exhilaration mingling in my mouth like sweet and sour wine. I remember the first time I saw a knight's lance shatter against a shield, the crack slicing through the chatter like a knife. There was something intoxicating about that moment, the power, the glory, the promise of blood. But it's not the jousters who grip my thoughts, it's Ilara, the girl with fiery hair and a smile that could melt the frost from winter. She stands at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide, reflecting the sun's rays like shards of glass. I can feel her hope, no, her desperation, pulsing through the throng, urging the knights on, urging me on. A harsh cry pierces the air. The first knight, Sir Cedric, a hulking figure wrapped in glimmering armor, charges forth, his steed thundering like a storm. I can hear the frantic beats of my own heart matching the rhythm of hooves. I should be cheering, my heart should soar, but instead, it plummets, weighed down by the shadows lurking just beneath the joyous surface. Cedric's opponent, a scrawny lad named Thomas, shivers in the face of his oncoming doom. I remember every doubt that flickers in his eyes, every second that feels like an eternity. The crowd roars, but it's a cacophony of fear wrapped in festivity. I clench my fists, feeling the tremors of anticipation. Not all that glitters is gold, some of it is rusted and jagged. The tip of Cedric's lance glints ominously as he aims. It's a moment frozen in time, the air thickens, and everything else fades, the laughter, the cheers, the scent of roasted meats wafting from the nearby stands. Just two knights, two destinies clashing together, and the fate of Ilara caught between them. Will you not fight for her? I whisper to myself, recalling the laughter we shared, the fleeting moments of stolen glances. But she is here, alive and breathing, waiting for the storm to pass. A love not yet realized, a heart not yet claimed. The impact is bone-shattering. Cedric's lance connects with Thomas's shield, splintering apart like dreams dashed on jagged rocks. The clanking of metal drowns out the gasps of the crowd, a symphony of horror playing out before me. Thomas is flung from his horse, a fragile bird tossed into the gale. I feel the collective intake of breath, the horror seeping into every pore of the crowd. I want to scream, to shout at fate to turn back, but words escape me, enshrined in silence. Ilara gasps, her hand flutters to her mouth, and I see the glimmer of tears in her eyes. That moment, when the world shatters around you, when hope flickers like a dying ember, I feel it clawing at my insides. I wish I could reach out, tell her there's more than this madness, that beyond the clang of armor and the taste of blood, there's love that can bloom amidst the chaos. But there's no time for sentiment in a world that revels in bloodshed, mocking joy with the skewered remnants of ambition. The knights regroup, ready for another bout, and I can feel the tension coil tighter, a snake preparing to strike. Every glance at Ilara feels like a promise I can't keep, a dream I'm too scared to commit to. A feast follows the jousts, a gaudy display of excess, drowning out the sting of defeat with honeyed words and spiced meats. The tables are laden, overflowing with roasted game and loaves of bread, but the joy is tainted with the aftertaste of fear. Laughter rises like smoke, curling into the air, but laughter can be a mask, a thin veneer hiding the darkness gnawing at our edges. I remember the way Ilara's eyes dart around, searching for something, someone, lost in the sea of revelry. "Will you dance with me?" I stammer, the words spilling out, raw and trembling. I think of Thomas, the frail knight knocked from his steed, and I can't bear to see her smile falter. With a smile that could burn brighter than the sun, she grasps my hand, pulling me into the thrumming pulse of the crowd. The music begins, the notes floating through the air like whispers of forgotten promises. We twirl, lost in the rhythm, but the spectre of the joust looms large in the shadows just beyond the flickering torchlight. I can feel the weight of the night pressing down, a heavy cloak of uncertainty, a reminder that joy and sorrow dance hand in hand. Ilara's laughter rings out, bright and clear, yet I can sense the tremor beneath. I wonder if she feels the same, the way life teeters between delight and despair. I want to scream, to shake the world from its stupor and demand answers. Why must joy be laced with sorrow? Why must the thrill of the joust echo the inevitability of pain? As night deepens, the games take a darker turn. The jesters emerge, their painted faces twisting in mockery of our fears, their laughter a haunting melody. Ilara clings to me, her warmth a temporary shield against the night's chill. Each jest feels like a dagger thrown into the heart of hope, and I can see her shuddering beneath the weight of unspoken fears. Tomorrow, it could be us, I murmur, the truth hanging heavy in the air. We laugh, but it's brittle, a thin facade cracking under the pressure of reality. We dance and feast, but the shadows grow longer, the laughter turning hollow, echoing through the night like a ghost's lament. The stars overhead shimmer like the scattered dreams of those who dared to hope. I wonder if they watch over us, or if they too are embroiled in the struggles of the earth below. I remember Ilara's bright smile, the way her eyes glisten under the moonlight, and I long for a moment of solace amidst the chaos, a glimmer of something lasting beyond the fleeting pleasures of jousts, feasts, and games. But the weight of tomorrow looms. The night is a fleeting escape, a thin veil over the chaos of life. And as I lose myself in the spiral of Ilara's laughter, I know that all too soon, the revelry will end, and the echoes of the joust, of glory, of pain, will ring louder than ever, pulling us back into the maelstrom of fate, where every cheer could be a requiem. And still, we dance. The night was a graveyard, shadows clawing at the stone walls of the castle as if they sought entry. I stood at the edge of a cold battlement, the wind howling like a banshee in lament. Below, the valley twisted into an abyss where the flickering torches of an approaching army painted the darkness in strokes of dread. My heart raced, a drum echoing in the silence, each beat a countdown to the inevitable. "Do you think they'll come for us?" It was Ilara, her voice a whisper that trembled in the chill. I turned to her, feeling the weight of her fear pressed against my chest like a dagger. Her eyes, pools of uncertainty, shimmered under the pale moonlight. She was a warrior, fierce and relentless, yet in this moment, she was a child caught in a storm. I could see the shadows of her past haunting her, lives lost, friends turned to dust, and the guilt that burrowed deep in her soul like a parasite. "They'll come," I replied, though I could feel the tremor in my own voice. "They always do." The castle walls rose around us, a formidable fortress built to withstand the tides of blood and betrayal, yet I felt its strength ebbing like the waning moon. Each stone held stories of heroism and despair, but all I could see was Ilara, standing there, clutching her sword like a lifeline, her knuckles white. Then there was Marcus, pacing along the parapet, a tempest of rage and regret. He breathed heavily, his thoughts a furious storm, more dangerous than the enemies that lurked below. I should have never let them leave, he spat, his voice crackling with guilt. I couldn't tell if he was speaking of the men who had fallen or the choices that had led them here. He was a soldier, not just of flesh and bone, but of ideals. And yet, with every step he took, I felt the burden of his decision settle like a shroud over us. I remember the way they laughed. The stories we told. It was supposed to be a feast, not a slaughter, he muttered, more to himself than us. His eyes glazed over, as if searching for ghosts in the darkness, ghosts of the friends we'd known before the bloodshed. Now look where we stand. The castle is our coffin, and we are the unwilling occupants. His self-loathing spilled into the air, thick and suffocating. The chilling wind enveloped us, a harbinger of the storm to come. I gripped the battlements, my palms slick with sweat and fear, each stone a reminder of what we fought for and what we could lose. Ilara's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the first glimmers of the enemy's torches flickered like fireflies in a graveyard. What if we're not enough, she breathed, the question hanging heavy between us. Enough for what? I shot back, the frustration clawing at me. To hold the walls? To protect this place? I glanced around the fortress, its ancient stones a testament to strength. Or to protect each other? My heart thudded painfully in my chest as I realized that this wasn't just about survival. It was about the bonds we formed in the crucible of darkness, about the love that flickered like a candle against the encroaching night. A scream shattered the silence, a distant cry that echoed through the valley. In that moment, time froze. The castle shuddered, the walls seemed to draw in a collective breath as if they felt the weight of our dread. Marcus stopped, his eyes wide, the ghost of despair twisting his features. Did you hear that? Ilara whispered, her voice cracking. What was that? The questions floated like shadows, unanswered and haunting. I could feel the tension coiling among us, the unspoken fear that this would be the last night we'd ever share together. Fortifications are only as strong as those who defend them, I murmured, my voice barely a thread in the tempest. But we can't let this place become a tomb. I gripped Ilara's shoulder, grounding myself in her presence, my heart waging war against the void of hopelessness. She turned to me, and for a moment, her fear flickered like a flame caught in a breeze. Marcus's rage flared. What do you know of fortitude? He spat, anger drowning his grief. You don't understand what it means to lose everything. This castle, this stone, what is it against an army that knows no mercy? He was unraveling, every thread of his bravado fraying before our eyes. I stepped closer, feeling the heat of his anger merge with my own desperation. It's more than stone, Marcus. It's us. It's love and sacrifice. My voice held a softness that contrasted the chaos swirling within. We may falter, but together, we are a force. The words hung in the air, fragile yet fierce, binding us in a moment where hope flickered against despair. The echo of footsteps drew nearer, a rhythmic pounding that mimicked the racing of our hearts. I could taste the fear like iron on my tongue, sharp and bitter. The enemy was upon us, and the fortress walls would soon tremble beneath the weight of their assault. Ilara drew her sword, the metal glinting coldly in the moonlight. If they come, she said, her voice steady, we fight. We fight for what we believe in. For each other. The fire in her eyes ignited something within me, a resolve that glowed like embers in the dark. I nodded, a silent vow echoing between us. But even as we prepared for the onslaught, I couldn't shake the feeling that our time was slipping away, like grains of sand falling through our fingers. I remembered a time when we laughed in the halls, when the air was thick with hope, before the shadows began to encroach. The torches grew brighter, illuminating the darkness as the enemy approached, their war cries a symphony of death. We were outnumbered, but as I stood beside Ilara and Marcus, I felt the weight of our shared memories, each laugh, each tear, each promise, binding us tighter than any stone wall. And as the clash of steel rang out like thunder, I knew that the castle, our fortress, was not merely a structure of defense. It was a testament to our spirit, a reflection of our resilience. The battle raged on, and with every heartbeat, we stood firm, a living testament to the fragile, beautiful tapestry of life and love even as the night threatened to swallow us whole. The air was thick, stifling, a suffocating mix of fear and despair. Shadows slithered across the stone walls of the castle, their whispered secrets echoing in the dimness. A distant scream cut through the silence, a raw, jagged sound that left an icy trail down my spine. I stumbled forward, heart pounding, the weight of dread heavy in my chest as I made my way to the source. Inside the chamber, Alizia lay twisted among the sheets, her pale skin ghostly against the dark fabric. Her breath was a shallow rasp, punctuated by desperate wheezes that clawed at her throat. I could feel the chill of death lurking just outside the door, its cold fingers brushing against the back of my neck. I remember the first time I saw her smile, the sunlight dancing in her hair like a halo. Now, as I watched her struggle, I felt like a thief, stealing away the last remnants of that light. "Please," I whispered, grasping her hand, feeling the frailness of her bones, the heat of fever coursing through her. "Fight, Alizia. You have to fight." But the words felt empty, they hung in the air like the stale scent of old medicine. I was all too aware that my pleas were nothing more than echoes in a vast chasm of hopelessness. In the corner, Lord Cedric stood, his figure cast in shadow, his face a mask of sorrow. The man who had once wielded power with a firm hand now seemed lost, as if the very ground beneath him had crumbled away. I saw his hands tremble, clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "This can't be it," he murmured, his voice cracking like dry twigs underfoot. "There must be something we can do." He was a man of intellect, a scholar of ancient texts and remedies. But what good were books when the spectre of death loomed so close? I wanted to shake him, to pull him back from the edge of despair. "Cedric, we can't just stand here." My voice broke, catching in the air like a bird with a broken wing. "We need to find help. Someone, anyone." His gaze fell to Alizia, the warmth of his anguish swirling around us like a tempest. "Help?" He scoffed, bitterness creeping into his tone. "Do you know how long it takes for a healer to reach us? By the time they arrive, he couldn't finish the thought, and I felt the weight of it settle in the pit of my stomach. "I'm not leaving her," I replied, my voice fierce and trembling. "If we have to, we'll find the remedies ourselves. We'll scour the castle for herbs, for anything that might help." My heart was racing, fueled by the desperation of the moment, the sheer will to fight against a foe that felt unbeatable. I turned my attention back to Alizia, her eyelids fluttering as if she were lost in a dream. "Alizia, I remember the stories you told me," I whispered, each word laced with urgency. "The way the stars look at night from the parapets, the fireflies lighting up the gardens. You've always had this way of making everything seem magical, even when it was just shadows and moonlight." But she was slipping away, the light in her eyes dimming with each shallow breath. The memories of her laughter echoed in my mind, a haunting melody that wrapped around me like chains. I felt Cedric's presence beside me, his warmth a fragile beacon in the gathering darkness. "Do you remember the summer festival?" Cedric's voice was soft, yet it struck a chord deep in my soul. "The way she danced under the stars, as if the whole world had faded away. How she turned the simplest moments into something extraordinary." I nodded, the memory flooding back, Alizia spinning in her flowy dress, laughter spilling from her lips, the air vibrant with life. It felt like a punishing joke now, the joy that once filled our hearts now tainted with sorrow. "What do we do?" I asked, the question hanging heavy between us. Cedric ran a hand through his hair, an action filled with frustration and anguish. "We need to find the remedies," he repeated, firming his resolve. "The texts in the library. They might hold something we can use." I could see the fire igniting in his eyes, a flicker of hope battling against the encroaching shadows. "Then let's go," I urged, my own heart beginning to thump with fervor. "We'll scour every inch of this castle until we find something, anything." The two of us raced through the halls, the stone cold beneath our feet echoing our frantic search. The air felt thicker here, as if the walls themselves were suffocating under the weight of illness. Every chamber we passed whispered tales of despair, of sickness that had claimed lives, of dreams deferred until the next rising sun. The library loomed ahead, its vastness both inviting and foreboding, towering shelves lined with dusty tomes. "Look for anything," I urged, urgency spilling from my lips as I began to pull books from their resting places, flinging them open and scanning their pages feverishly. Time felt like a phantom, slipping through our fingers like sand. I remember the moments of silence, the tension palpable as we searched, punctuated only by the rustle of parchment and the soft thud of a book hitting the ground. My breathing grew ragged, each inhale a reminder of what was at stake. "Here!" Cedric's voice shattered the silence, his finger trembling over a page, the ink barely dried. "It speaks of a herb, a flower that blooms under the moonlight. It's said to draw out illness." I couldn't contain the hope that surged within me. "Then we'll find it," I declared, my heart racing once more. "We will fight for Alizia." As we rushed out of the library, our mission ignited a fire in our souls, determination mingling with fear. The castle felt alive with secrets, shadows whispering their fears, echoes of what lingered in the corners of our hearts. We moved like specters through the moonlit corridors, the weight of the world pressing against us, urging us to act before it was too late. Time was a cruel taskmaster, and in the open courtyard, the night wrapped around us like a cloak. I glanced back at the castle, its darkened windows like hollow eyes watching, waiting for our return. Would we prevail, or would we succumb to the same fate that had haunted its halls for centuries? I remember the cool breeze that tousled my hair, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and fading hopes. "We will not fail," I whispered into the night, as the cosmos above shimmered with the weight of countless stars, each one a reminder that even in the darkest hours, light was still possible. The wind howled like a banshee, tugging at the edges of Lady Aveline's gown, a swirling tempest of silk and despair. The fabric whispered secrets to the chilling air, but she was deaf to all but the roar of her heart, thump, thump, thump. Once, it had been a delicate rhythm, now, it pounded like a war drum, calling her to battle. She stood on the precipice of the grand balcony, the city sprawled beneath her like an open wound, raw and bleeding. The streets were a tangled mess of cobblestones and shadows, where common folk scurried like rats, cloaked in rags that barely shielded them from the biting cold. "I remember the warmth," she whispered, fists clenched at her sides. She remembered the laughter of her late husband, the way his noble attire gleamed under the sun, deep crimson velvet, stitched with golden thread. Now, all that remained were the echoes of their dreams, hollow and cruel. The court had stripped her of everything, leaving her with naught but a gown, once resplendent, now a shroud of memories. The tight corset cut into her like the dagger that had stolen her love. The marketplace was alive, a cacophony of haggling voices and the scent of decay, mingling with the sweetness of ripe apples. There, amidst the chaos, stood Thomas, a baker's son whose dreams were as heavy as the loaves he carried. His tunic was threadbare, patched in places where hope had frayed. He glanced furtively at Lady Aveline, his eyes wide, yet full of fire. "You don't belong here," he murmured, though the wind swallowed his words. But the weight in his gaze anchored her, pulling her from the dizzying heights of her noble isolation. "I remember when I wore the crown," she said, her voice barely a whisper, trembling like autumn leaves. "When the world was mine to command, and my heart was light." "Crown!" Thomas scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips as he hoisted a basket of bread. "That was a pretty thing for a pretty lady. But crowns rust, and hearts," his voice cracked, and she could see the scars etched into his soul, invisible but palpable. "Hearts are tethered to the earth, not to the sky." And there it was, the truth laid bare between them, raw and unnerving. The fabric of their lives intertwined, yet they were worlds apart. She was a creature of silk and satin, he a spirit of flower-dusted hands and weary dreams. In this moment, their attire spoke volumes, hers a delicate prison, his a badge of survival. The kingdom around them creaked like an old ship, teetering on the brink of something catastrophic. The nobles, dressed in finery, paraded their extravagance, oblivious to the hungry eyes watching from the sidelines, eyes like hollow-out marbles, glistening with desperation. The common folk wore the scars of 1,000 forgotten battles, their clothes less of fabric and more of stories, a patchwork of lives lived in the shadows. "It's a cruel game," Thomas said, the intensity of his gaze piercing through her noble facade. "They tell us what to wear, how to look. But, inside, we're all just bones and skin, aching to breathe. Aveline felt the weight of that truth settle deep within her, a ghost haunting her every smile. You think they care about our hearts, she scoffed, her laughter sharp like broken glass. They only care about the threads that bind us. His fingers brushed against the coarse fabric of his tunic, a stark contrast to the silks that flowed around her. But your threads are fraying, Aveline. A gown can't cover up the cracks in your heart. And then, just like that, the air thickened with tension. The clock tower chimed ominously in the distance, marking the hour when the darkness would descend, and with it, the weight of her revelations. The grand ball loomed, an event where masked faces would dance, and hearts would beat to the rhythm of deceit. The nobles would twirl, their gowns swirling like the chaos in their souls, while the common folk watched, yearning for a glimpse of a life they could scarcely imagine. I remember, Aveline said again, this time with a tremor of desperation. I remember the nights when we laughed, Thomas. When the world felt whole. He stepped closer, the heat of his presence igniting something buried deep within her. Then fight for it, he urged, his voice fierce but gentle. You're not just a gown, Aveline. You're a storm waiting to happen. But what did she know of storms? The noble class had cloaked her in silence, wrapped her in expectations, suffocating her with their ideals of beauty and grace. She was a marionette, dancing to a tune played by unseen hands. I can't, she breathed, hardly recognizing her own voice. To fight means to lose what little I have left. Or to reclaim what was stolen, he countered, relentless, a flame to her candle. They fear you. They fear your power. They fear the truth that your attire can't hide. As the wind howled around them, the threads of their lives intertwined further, a tapestry woven with the desperate threads of hope and despair. The echoes of laughter faded, replaced by the cries of those too long silenced, a haunting reminder that the fabric of society was fraying at the seams. Her heart raced, the pulse quickening as the clock struck again, the sound echoing like a death knell. Aveline felt her resolve harden, like iron forged in the fires of grief and loss. You're right, she whispered, the words a soft rebellion against the tyranny of her past. I am a storm. And in that moment, the shadows deepened, the city breathed, and the pieces began to shift. She would not be a ghost in her own life, nor would she let the chains of opulence bind her spirit. Aveline glanced at Thomas, a flicker of understanding passing between them, a bond forged in the fires of their struggles. As the world continued its rhythmic dance of nobility and despair, she donned her gown once more, no longer a shroud but a banner of defiance. And as they stood side by side, the noble and the commoner, they became an emblem of hope. The fabric of their lives would blend, and the tension of their differences would ignite a spark, a revolution born of silk and rags. Because in that moment, beneath the weight of expectations and the shadow of fate, they were no longer merely adorned in clothing, they were draped in the very fabric of their humanity. And as the night enveloped the city, they stepped into the fray, two souls ready to challenge the darkness, because every heartbeat deserved to be heard. The clock struck midnight, its resonance slicing through the air like a knife through flesh. Outside, a storm brewed, dark clouds roiling like angry spirits, and thunder rumbled in the distance, a harbinger of the chaos that lay deep within. Inside the dimly lit parlor, shadows waltzed on the walls, a silent audience to the unfolding drama. Clara clutched the letter, her fingers trembling, the paper crumpling under the weight of her despair. I didn't mean to, she whispered to the shadows, as though they might understand the tumult that churned within her. Across the room, Marcus stood by the fire, his back turned, the flames licking at his silhouette. He was a fortress of anger and confusion, every muscle tense, every breath a battle against the hurricane of emotions that threatened to consume him. The letter held secrets, secrets that could fracture their world, shatter their carefully constructed alliances. You don't even know, he began, his voice low and guttural, like the growl of a beast cornered. I know enough, Clara shot back, the venom in her voice bitter and pointed. She could feel the walls closing in, the history they had built together, moments stitched into the fabric of their lives, beginning to unravel. Memories flooded her mind, the laughter of shared meals, the quiet comfort of evenings spent wrapped in each other's arms. But now, those memories felt like ghosts, taunting her with the promise of what they once had. Enough? Marcus turned, his eyes glinting like shards of ice. You don't think I know what it means to lose it all? To watch everything I've built slip through my fingers like sand. His voice cracked, the rawness of his pain palpable in the stale air. Each word was a brick, a stone thrown in the fragile glass house of their love. Clara wanted to bridge the distance, to reach out and touch the man she once adored, but the chasm between them felt insurmountable, like a raging river filled with jagged rocks. Instead, she clutched the letter tighter, the ink now a deep indigo stain on her heart. She could almost smell the musky scent of betrayal, could almost see the shadows of their ancestors lurking, watching, judging. You're not the only one who has sacrificed, she said, her voice trembling. I've given everything for this family. Family. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. It was the same word that echoed in the chambers of their ancestors' hearts, the very bedrock of their lives, yet it felt like a lie now. Family or chains, he countered, every syllable dripping with disdain. What bonds us, Clara? Love or obligation? Duty or desire? And in that moment, the storm outside roared louder, as if the universe itself was responding to their turmoil. Clara's heart raced, she could feel the walls of their existence trembling, ready to cave in. She remembered the wedding, a sea of faces, all wearing masks of joy, but behind each smile lay a story, a tether. Alliances forged in blood, kinship that stretched like an ancient vine, binding them to a past riddled with both hope and despair. Do you think they care about our happiness? She spat, a fierce fire lighting her eyes. Do you think they care about us? Her voice cracked, and Marcus's expression softened for just a moment, a flicker of the love they had once bathed in. What do you want from me, Clara? He asked, his voice a whisper now, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts haunting their fragile union. What do you want us to be? I want us to be real, she cried, the desperation clawing at her throat. To be free from the weight of these expectations. You know what they say about marriage, it's a contract written in blood, but this is suffocating. She felt the walls around her tightening, each breath a struggle as memories of their vows, those ancient promises, threatened to choke her. Marcus stepped closer, the heat of his body mingling with the cold dread in the room. She saw it then, his vulnerability, the crack in his armor that revealed the wounded boy beneath the man. I remember, he started, his voice tremulous. I remember standing before everyone, thinking love was enough. Thinking we could fight the world together. He swallowed hard, the weight of his own memories pressing down on him. But what if love isn't enough? The truth hung between them, a palpable thing, thick as fog. It was a truth that echoed in the hearts of countless families, weaving a tapestry of choices and consequences that spanned generations. Clara could see the shadows of their ancestors, each carrying their own burdens, their own scars. They were not so different, after all, just souls tangled in an intricate web of kinship, each struggling to find their own light in the darkness. I remember when our daughter was born, she said, her voice softening as tears threatened to spill. The moment I held her, I thought of the legacy we were creating. But now, her breath hitched, pain clawing at her throat. I don't want her to inherit this darkness. Marcus's gaze softened, his resolve wavering as he took a step forward. What if we break the cycle? He asked, vulnerability cracking through his facade. What if we redefine what family means? What if we make our own rules? But could they? The weight of history pressed down on them, the swirling tempest outside echoing the storm within. Clara's heart raced, a wildfire of hope and fear igniting inside her chest. She could feel it, a flicker of possibility, a chance to escape the chains of their lineage. We can break free, she whispered, the words tasting like rebellion on her lips. And as lightning illuminated the darkened room, it felt like fate was leaning in, urging them to choose love, choose freedom, choose life beyond the weight of expectation. The storm raged on, but in that moment, Clara and Marcus stood together, teetering at the precipice of something new, something terrifying, something beautiful. Then, a sudden crash echoed from behind, a shattering sound that sent a jolt through their fragile connection. It was the sound of the past breaking apart, the remnants of their inherited bond scattering like leaves caught in the wind. Clara's heart raced, the world around her blurring as they faced the unknown, a reckoning, a rebirth perhaps, but it was just the beginning of a new chaos that beckoned them forward, stitched together by love, fear, and the relentless pull of family. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing through the castle's ancient stone walls, whispering secrets of fear and longing. Inside, shadows curled around corners, and the flicker of torches danced against the cold, unyielding stone. I remember the scent of damp earth and stale bread, clinging to the air, heavy with unspoken words. The laughter of children echoed faintly, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. It was a sound so sweet, yet so laced with desperation, you could almost taste the decay of innocence. A small boy, Thomas, with dirt-smudged cheeks and wild hair, clutched a tattered toy sword, his eyes alight with a fierce determination that belied his fragile frame. He lunged forward, bravely confronting a shadow that loomed larger than life against the flickering flame. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, his voice breaking, an echo of bravado crashing against the walls of this fortress. Deep inside, he was terrified, his heart racing, pulse pounding, as he faced the darkness that had stolen away so many in the castle. And yet, he swung that sword with all the might a 5-year-old could muster, every swing a desperate plea for bravery. Beside him, Clara, his elder sister, though only a year older, bore the weight of 1,000 fears. Her heart was an old clock, ticking away moments of lost joy. She glanced at Thomas, her eyes wide, searching for strength even as she felt her own crumbling. "Stop! You'll wake the ghosts," she hissed, pulling at his sleeve. Clara knew the stories, the echoes of children who had played in these very halls, only to vanish without a trace, swallowed whole by the shadows. But how could she tell him that? How could she dim the spark of courage that flickered in her brother's soul? Instead, she turned her gaze toward the labyrinth of stone, a place woven with dreams and nightmares alike. The castle, this grand, wretched prison, was their home. It housed more than just walls, it held their laughter, their cries, their secrets. And yet, it felt suffocating, a place where dreams twisted into nightmares, where every game of hide and seek became a perilous gamble with fate. "I remember the time we found the hidden passage," she whispered, eyes darting to the darkened corner, the one that led to the old chapel. It was a memory laced with equal parts thrill and dread, a reminder of how quickly childhood could slip into darkness. Maybe we could find it again," she suggested, hope flickering in her heart like a candle struggling against an onslaught of wind. He grinned, the innocence of youth shining through the fear. "Let's do it." Thomas laughed, determination rearing its head once more. They tiptoed, hearts thundering, into the recesses of the castle soul, where dust motes danced in the shafts of light, trapped in a moment that felt both eternal and ephemeral. Each creaking floorboard beneath their feet echoed a warning, a reminder of the secrets buried deep within these walls. As they navigated through the gloom, the air thickened, charged with an electric tension that pricked at their skin. Memories rushed back like a tide, relentless and unyielding. Clara recalled the stories told by the old nurse, a tale of a child taken by the darkness, spirits entwined with the living, forever playing in shadows. The ghostly laughter of forgotten children danced along the edges of her mind. Their spirits, trapped, eternally searching for solace, a fate that both terrified and captivated her. "Clara!" Thomas's voice jolted her back. He had stopped, his tiny finger pointed at a crack in the wall, a narrow space that seemed to beckon them closer. "Look! It's the passage!" His excitement was palpable, a raw pulse of life amidst the stillness. Her heart raced alongside his. Was it the thrill of adventure or the fear of the unknown that coursed through her veins? Perhaps both. She stepped forward, her hand brushing against the cold stone, feeling a pulse beneath the surface, an echo of lives once lived, laughter once shared. "What if we find something?" Her voice trailed off, swallowed by the silence that begged to be filled with laughter or screams. Instead, it was filled with the weight of uncertainty, like a fog thickening around them. "Something good?" Thomas asked, his eyes gleaming with possibility. "Or something bad?" "Both," she admitted, a smile struggling against the gravity of the moment. "But we have to be brave, right?" "Right," he echoed, though his voice trembled, betraying the fear that lay beneath his bravado. With a trembling breath, they squeezed through the crack, into the darkness beyond, an abyss of unknowns, a playground for the restless spirits that seemed to linger just out of sight. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and Clara's heart raced with a terrifying thrill. They tumbled into a cavernous chamber, the stones whispering secrets from centuries past. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air bristled with the echoes of laughter that felt more like a warning than a welcome. They were not alone, they could feel it in their bones, a presence lurking just beyond their vision, a watchful gaze that sent a chill coursing through their spines. "Maybe we should go back," Clara murmured, her voice barely a whisper. But Thomas, brave and foolish, pushed forward. "No. We can't leave now. What if we find the treasure?" "Treasure? What treasure could possibly lie here?" The walls reverberated with the ghosts of their ancestors, a cacophony of joy and grief, a reminder of the price of play, the cost of dreams lost in the shadows. They were children, yes, but in that moment, amidst the ruins of forgotten hopes, they felt the weight of a world that stretched beyond their youthful imaginations, a cosmos of uncertainty that thrashed against their innocent hearts. I remember, Clara's breath hitched, and she felt the shadows tightening around her like a noose. She thought of the stories, the warnings whispered in the dark, those who had ventured too far and never returned. But Thomas, he was undeterred. "We're brave," he shouted, defiance breaking through the fog of doubt. "We can be heroes." And in that moment, they were. The world beyond faded, replaced by the haunting pulse of the castle, the echo of their laughter mingling with the whispers of spirits. They were children, playing amidst the ruins of forgotten dreams, caught in a web woven of hope and fear, a cycle that would never truly end, spiraling toward the next moment, the next heartbeat. As they stepped deeper into the darkness, the air grew thick with anticipation, the walls closing in like a tightening grip. A moment of reckoning loomed on the horizon, one that would test their bond, their courage, and their very souls. And the castle, oh, the castle held its breath, waiting, watching, wanting. Snowflakes, like tiny ghosts, danced down from a sky heavy with secrets. They fell, blanketing the stone courtyard of the castle, muffling the screams of the past. I stood frozen, breath forming clouds that vanished in the sharp winter air, and I remembered how the chill seeped through the walls, how it whispered cruel tales of hunger and longing. The castle, a fortress of stone and shadow, stood resolute against the biting wind, but inside, something was unraveling. Cecily crouched in the corner of the great hall, her fingers tracing a pattern on the icy stone floor. Each stroke seemed to echo her despair, a reminder of her lost dreams. She had always believed the winter would bring a chance for warmth, a flicker of hope amid the darkness. But today, the cold felt different, sharper, as though it had teeth. The flickering candlelight cast her silhouette against the walls, and for a moment, she seemed less a person and more a wraith, a ghost trapped in a world that had forgotten her. "I remember the way summer used to feel," she whispered, her voice breaking the silence like glass shattering on stone. "The gardens were alive then, bursting with color. Now, everything is just dead." I felt her pain knotting my stomach, because I remembered too. The scent of roses, the laughter of children, the way the sun painted the courtyard in hues of gold. Now, it was as if winter had claimed those memories, as if frostbite had stripped the life from our souls. Across the hall, Thomas stood rigid, his gaze fixed on the fireplace, where embers flickered like dying stars. Each crackle was a reminder of the warmth slipping away, and with it, his own resolve. He had been tasked with bringing in firewood, and still, he hesitated. The burden of expectation weighed on him like a millstone. "What good is this?" he muttered, kicking at a pile of neglected logs. "All this work, and for what? To keep us warm for another night of misery." His words hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the oppressive silence before a storm. I felt the anger rise within me, but it was laced with something else, fear. Fear that we were all losing hope, losing ourselves. "Thomas!" I called, my voice trembling with urgency. "We can't give up. We can't let winter steal our spirit. Remember last spring? Remember how we danced in the gardens, how we laughed until our sides ached?" But he just shook his head, shadows deepening around his eyes. "Dancing in a garden of thorns, you mean?" The spring will come, yes, but what then? It'll just lead to another winter. This cycle, it suffocates me. Cecily's breath caught in her throat, and I felt the air thicken like fog. This was winter, the season of despair, where hearts froze in the icy grip of uncertainty. But even in the depths of that despair, beneath the layers of sorrow, I sensed a flicker, a stubborn ember refusing to be snuffed out. Let's remember the way things used to be, I urged, taking a step closer. The laughter, the warmth, the way the sun kissed our skin. We are not just prisoners of this castle. We are alive. We can change how we face this. The wind howled outside, a mournful sound that wrapped around us like a shroud, and I saw it then, the flicker of hope igniting in Cecily's eyes. She looked at Thomas, then back at me, as if weighing our words against the darkness. But what if the changes don't come? What if we are always stuck in this cycle of death and rebirth, never truly living? Her voice trembled with vulnerability, and I felt the reality of her fear. The seasons had their way of shaping our lives, the new blooms of spring, the scorching heat of summer, the vibrant decay of autumn, and the crushing weight of winter. Each one had its own lessons, but winter felt like a tomb. It's not about what happens outside, I said softly. It's about how we choose to fight against it. It's about holding on to the warmth within us, even when the world tries to freeze us solid. Yes, the winter is merciless. But spring always comes. And with it, the promise of rebirth. I took a breath, letting the warmth of my words fill the space between us, hoping to cut through the bitterness that clung like a second skin. I felt the weight of our shared histories, those moments of sheer joy and those haunting shadows of despair. Outside, the wind screamed, tearing through the castle, a beast raging against the confines of stone. Inside, we were three souls huddled together, battling against the tide of darkness. I glanced at Thomas, desperation clawing at my heart. What if we can change the story? Each season is a chance to start anew. Each winter is simply a prelude to the beauty that follows. He turned, his eyes searching mine, and just for an instant, I saw a flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps, or the fragile glimmer of hope. I remember the way you laughed, he said, a hint of a smile breaking through the clouds. You always found the ridiculous in everything. Even when the plague swept through the castle, you joked about the doctors looking like birds. Laughter bubbled up, unexpected and bright, slicing through the gloom like a shining dagger. Cecily joined in, her voice ringing with life. And you, Thomas, always complaining about how the soup tasted like shoe leather. I remember thinking, at least we're eating something, right? As our laughter filled the hall, I felt the weight of winter lift, even just a little. It was a fragile thing, this moment of connection, but it was there, a flame in the dark. I remember, I said, allowing the warmth to envelop us, that laughter is the antidote to despair. It's how we fight back, how we withstand the cold. And in that moment, surrounded by echoes of our shared past, the harshness of winter felt a bit softer. The shadows shifted ever so slightly, and I could almost hear the distant song of spring, a promise lingering just beyond our grasp, waiting to return. The night stretched on, and we remained entwined in our fragile hope, the castle bearing witness to our whispered dreams and fears. We were alive, and with each season that passed, we would adapt, we would change. The chill of winter may have wrapped around us, but deep down, we knew, spring always follows, in its own time. And with it, a new beginning awaits. The great hall smelled of smoke and sweat, a thick, suffocating haze that clung to the air like an uninvited guest. I stood at the far end, heart hammering like a blacksmith's hammer striking iron, watching as the emissaries from the north, cloaked in their furs and shadows, filled the space with their presence. Each step they took was measured, deliberate, the weight of their icy disdain palpable across the room. I could feel it in my bones, like frost creeping into my marrow. Do you see them? I whispered to Ilara, my sister, who stood rigid beside me. Her eyes, always so full of fire, were now clouded with uncertainty. She was the embodiment of grace, yet in that moment, she felt like a bird trapped in a cage, wings clipped by the weight of diplomacy, of alliances we could not afford to lose. I see them, she said, her voice a mere breath, but it is not their eyes I fear. It is what lies behind them. The tension coiled around us like a serpent ready to strike, and I remembered the stories Mom used to tell us, how alliances were once sealed with blood and sacrifice, how the dance of power resembled a game of chess where every move could lead to ruin. Oh, how naive I had been to think the world could change. The flickering torchlight cast long, eerie shadows across the stone walls, and I wondered if this was how ghosts felt, forever trapped in a moment of impending doom. Lord Hadran, the emissary, spoke, his voice as cold and sharp as a winter's night. "We have come to negotiate," he declared, his eyes scanning the hall like a hawk searching for prey. "But you must understand, our terms are—" I lost the words, the air thickening around me like a noose. I could see Ilara's fingers tightening around the hilt of her dagger, a token of our family's strength, but in her heart, she wrestled with the specter of betrayal, her loyalty pulling her in one direction, her instincts in another. "Your terms," I interrupted, feeling the desperation clawing at my throat. "Are they not the same as always? Power for blood, trust for treachery." A silence fell, heavy and expectant, like the breath before a storm. Hadran leaned closer, his breath a chill that sent shivers down my spine. "You speak truth, young prince, but truth is a fickle friend in matters of diplomacy. And friendship, well, it's a fragile thing, isn't it?" I could feel the room close in around me, walls pressing against my chest. The reality of our situation, the fragile alliance that rested on the edge of a knife, rippled through the air. The North would not come with gifts. No, they would come with demands, with threats concealed beneath layers of reason. The stakes had never been higher, and I felt the weight of my ancestors, long gone but not forgotten, pressed down upon me. "What do you want?" Ilara's voice rang out, stronger now, fueled by an anger that ignited something within me. "What price will you demand this time?" Hadran smiled, a predator's smile, a flash of teeth against a backdrop of winter. "Oh, dear lady, it is not a price you'll pay in gold or land. It is in trust and loyalty, in the promise you can never truly give." His words hung in the air, a ghostly echo that reverberated through my mind. I remembered the night I had met Ilara's eyes across the table, our laughter mingling like the sweet scent of ripe fruit. We had been so naive then, playing our games of courtly love and politics, unaware of the shadows that lurked just outside our vision. Suddenly, I was back in that moment, the past and present colliding in a dizzying whirl. I could hear the laughter still, feel the warmth of the light surrounding us. But now, it felt like a cruel joke. Those evenings were ghosts of a time that could never be reclaimed, tainted by the encroaching darkness of our reality. "What is it you seek from us?" I pressed, my voice trembling but resolute. I stepped forward, a final act of rebellion against the suffocating dread that threatened to consume me. "Speak plainly. I will not be another pawn in your game." Hadran's gaze flickered, a hint of something, admiration, before it returned to ice. "Courage is commendable. But courage can lead to folly." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted, the air crackling with unspoken threats, the tension ripe like overripe fruit ready to burst. I could feel Ilara's hand brush against mine, a silent promise of solidarity in this storm of uncertainty, a tether to pull me back from the edge of despair. "We are willing to listen," she said, her voice steady and firm, a lighthouse against the storm. "But terms must be fair. We will not sacrifice our people for your ambitions." Hadran chuckled, a low, mocking sound that echoed against the stone walls. "Fairness is an illusion, sweet princess. In this game, there are no knights in shining armor. Only shadows and whispers." In that moment, the hall dimmed, as if the torches themselves recoiled from his words. The shadows stretched and twisted, pulling me deeper into the abyss of uncertainty. I felt my pulse quicken, each heartbeat a drum sounding a warning. Suddenly, the door slammed open, an explosion of sound and chaos. Footsteps thundered across the stone floor as guards rushed in, faces pale, eyes wide with terror. "My lord," one of them cried, breathless. "There's trouble at the border." And just like that, the air shifted again, thick with panic and dread. I could feel Ilara's grip tighten around my arm, a lifeline in the storm. There were no more games, the stakes had escalated beyond mere words. We were truly caught in a web woven of alliances and enmities, each thread pulsing with the weight of our fates. The emissaries exchanged glances, their earlier confidence now cracked, uncertainty seeped into the cracks of their facade. Hadron's gaze hardened, a predator sensing the shift in the winds. "It seems we are interrupted," he said coolly, voice a deadly whisper that silenced all. I knew, in that moment, that the dance had begun anew, the music of tension rising like a storm on the horizon, each note a reminder of the fragility of our existence. The world was more than just a game of alliances, it was a battlefield, and we would need to tread carefully, lest we find ourselves the pawns sacrificed in a game we had barely begun to understand. And as we stood there, together yet apart, I felt the pulse of possibility thrumming beneath the chaos, an electric surge of hope mingled with fear. The ghosts of our pasts whispered in my ears, urging me to rise. This was not the end, it was merely the beginning. Night had fallen over the castle, draping it in an oppressive shroud of darkness. The torches flickered, shadows dancing like restless ghosts on the stone walls. A frigid wind howled through the empty halls, echoing with the bitter memories of a time when laughter and light filled the air. I stood, heart pounding, just outside the great hall where they had gathered, the weight of the moment pressing firmly against my chest. Was it the chill of the wind, or the cold dread of what was to come? I couldn't tell. Inside, voices clashed like swords, each argument a testament to the desperation gripping our society. Lord Yuan, once a figure of strength, now stood with shoulders hunched, his face drawn tight. The years had stripped him of the arrogance that once defined him, leaving behind a man teetering on the edge of ruin. "We cannot simply abandon our way of life," he shouted, his voice trembling as if the stone walls themselves might crumble beneath the weight of his despair. I remember how it felt, the stinging ache in my chest as I watched Yuan, once so proud, now a mere shadow of himself. And it was there, in his eyes, that I saw the truth, an understanding that this castle, this very symbol of our existence, was crumbling. It was more than the stone and mortar, it was our identity, our past, and with each crack in its facade, a piece of me shattered too. Across the room, nestled among the flickering shadows, was Ilara. She always had a fire in her spirit, a spark that could ignite the dimmest corners of our lives. But tonight, that fire was reduced to flickering embers. "Yuan, the people are suffering. They are starving while we cling to this relic." Her voice softened, the fierceness giving way to a vulnerability that left me breathless. The desperation in her eyes mirrored the very essence of our plight, a society teetering on the precipice of change. I remember the way she looked at him, searching for something, understanding, reconciliation, perhaps even love. Yet, love felt like a ghost in this hollow hall, haunting memories of passion swallowed by the bitter taste of reality. The echoes of their past lingered in the air, a reminder of what once was stolen moments in moonlit gardens, laughter shared over goblets of wine, and whispered secrets beneath the stars. But those stars felt far away now, lost in the haze of a world shifting beneath our feet. A voice broke through the tension, sharp and biting. It was Rael, the newcomer with his wild ideas and unsettling confidence. "Let the castle fall. It's time to embrace the new, to push forward." His words cut through the air like a dagger, igniting a fury that swirled around the room. I felt the heat rising, the collective breath of the assembly tightening around us. It was a battle of ideals, a clash of the old and the new, of tradition and progress. My heart raced, caught in the tide of shifting tides, unsure of where to place my allegiance. But what did I know? I was just an onlooker, a mere observer of the chaos unfolding, the jester in a court of kings and queens. I felt like a failed historian, scribbling down the absurdities of a world hurtling into madness while everyone else fought for their futures. I remember the irony. We clung to these crumbling walls, yet the very essence of our lives poured out like sand through clenched fingers. Outside, the moon hung high, an indifferent witness to our plight. I could see the shadows of the villagers moving about their meager lives, their faces drawn tight with worry, their bellies empty. They had no time for the grand debates of lords and ladies, only the pressing need to survive. I had watched them day after day, the light in their eyes extinguished slowly, one bitter moment at a time. "Have you forgotten?" Ilara's voice rang out again, desperation choking her words. This castle kept us safe, yes, but at what cost? We've built our lives on the backs of the very people we now ignore. Her eyes burned with a passion long stifled, and for a moment, I believed she could light the way out of this darkness. But Ewan, blinded by his fear, could not see. You speak of change as if it were a grand adventure. It's chaos, Ilara. His voice cracked, and in that instant, he became a mirror of us all, fearful, trembling, clinging to the familiar even as it slipped from our grasp. I felt the weight of their emotions, fear mingling with resentment, the aching longing for what was and the dread of what lay ahead. The air was thick, charged with tension, each heartbeat counting down to an explosion. I could feel it, the air hummed with unspoken words, truths buried beneath years of tradition and silence. In that moment, I saw them, the tangled web of humanity woven into the fabric of this castle. Each heartbeat echoed with the realization that this was not just a struggle for power, but a reckoning of identity. What did we stand for? Who were we in the face of change? And as the arguments raged on, I felt my own emotions rise, fury at the stubbornness of my lord, sadness for a future slipping away, and a desperate yearning for connection that seemed just out of reach. I remember the way the shadows shifted, the light flickering as if pleading for release. A clock chimed somewhere in the vastness of the castle, each chime a reminder that time was relentless, marching ever forward while we stood paralyzed by our fears. The world outside was changing, and the castle was merely a relic of a bygone era, trapped in its own decaying history. Change is a monster, Rael shouted, his voice rising above the chaos, but it's a monster we must face. And for a fleeting moment, the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward him, a collective breath held in anticipation. The air crackled with the tension of an impending storm, and I felt it, the pulse of history coursing through my veins, an echo of a future waiting to be born. I stood at the crossroads of hearts and souls, a witness to this raw, unfiltered confrontation. And I felt it, the weight of transformation, the ache of loss, the flickers of hope buried deep within our shared humanity. The castle moaned, its stones groaning under the pressure of unspoken dreams and crumbling aspirations. And as I looked into their eyes, Ewan's desperation, Ilara's fierce spirit, Rael's unyielding resolve, I couldn't help but wonder, would we rise from the ashes of what we once were, or would this be the end of an era, the final chapter in a story written long ago? Time seemed to stretch, the shadows swirling, whispering secrets of a past we could never reclaim. The castle stood, an eternal witness to our struggle, waiting for us to decide, would we embrace the future or hold tight to the ghosts of our past? The choice lay heavy in the air, each moment a heartbeat echoing the inevitable decline, the dawning of a new age waiting just beyond the horizon.